Sarah Stevens Morley.
Here.
Jeff Solon.
Here.
Greg Rosenblatt.
Here.
Chris Denny.
Here.
Megan Rockwell.
Here.
Dennis Ryu.
Here.
Chuck Knapp. Here. Thank you.
Okay, and I don't know if you're names of everybody else, but maybe you want to pass a piece of paper around and pick something up since we have a lot of people here today. Pledge of Allegiance. Have any other conversation, any other discussion? If not, then all those in favor of the minutes as amended? Thank you. And you abstain. Action on submitted invoices. I had sent you 2 invoices that came to us. Both from Arcadis, $6,550.70. I take it back, it's all one invoice, it's not 2. The total was $6,550.70 for services for Arcadis. You may notice that it only is written under Norton. That's because, as Rich Sitnick explained it to me, they don't yet have the contract in hand, and therefore their system won't allow them to open up 2 different accounts. So I guess, as soon as they have that contract in hand, they'll open that up and take care of those. So that's why it's all under Norton at the moment. Do we have a motion to approve the invoices as presented? Chuck, second? Second, Dennis. Any discussion? All right, then all those in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed, none, it's unanimous. Chairman's report. We've had some very, very detailed and effective meetings that I've been lucky to attend. Most of these have been online. The first one on June 30th was a working group dealing with the site plan, the parking plans, the buses, all that sort of thing. Included school personnel, included obviously the architects, and included even people like those people that run the buses for the school district. Very, very good meeting. Talked a lot about the needs of the way the buses come in, the crossover between the buses and the parent traffic, sidewalk plans and maintenance of the outside areas. And I think we gained quite a bit of input from that meeting. Second meeting on July 11th was a working group, that was just a day or two ago, on safety and security, very detailed, and did include a couple of our local safety people, chief of police and one of the officers. And I gather, Vince, you invited some others but couldn't make it from fire department or whatever.
So we had subsequent meetings.
So they were invited to the
Yeah.
meeting now, and it gave us some wonderful input as we went through. And you can imagine, a lot of different potential scenarios that they were looking at. And I don't know if, I haven't looked at the packet yet, if you're going through some of that this evening. So you're really looking at, what I was impressed with, I think what you'll see this evening is, we think of the safety stuff, we obviously think of the man traps and the bulletproof glass and all that, but an awful lot of it is just thinking about the design and how the design makes it easier to monitor the site and watch the site. July 11th also, I presented to the town council. Once again, the town council wanted me to thank you all for all your hard work and let you know how appreciative they are. They approved unanimously our commissioning agent. Asked a few questions, not too many, a little bit about what a schematic design is and how it looks, and questions about things like, playgrounds and things like that, but nothing that was too difficult. It was a fairly short presentation in comparison to some of the ones we had done. But the architects had come the month before, so I think they had a good detailed feeling for what was going on. After the last meeting, I had received some questions and comments from some people, and I wanted to just go over that document. I sent it to you. But I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. And and I'm summarizing the questions or comments here. If people want to expound on them, you're welcome to. The first one, the MEP possible designs were presented at the last meeting. There was a request to provide guidance on which systems were desired, the goals of the committee. Some members felt that we didn't at this time have adequate time or information to make informed decisions and that more information was needed. And, I think that clearly, and I had mentioned it to Justin, I said, it's a great presentation, a lot of information, a lot of detail. It's something I would have loved to have seen, a month or two earlier, so we had some more time to deal with it all. But I did speak with Justin about it, and he made it clear that at tonight's meeting, there would be a very clear presentation made in terms of what the recommendations are and some of the pricing that's involved. The plans that were presented at the meeting did not include essential spaces such as storage rooms, custodial closets, electrical rooms, mechanical closets. Again, I spoke with Jeff and Justin about this, and I think you'll see on the plans for the North End School today, those items have now all been plugged in. In the meeting, the architect stated he was unsure if the geotechnical engineer is included as part of the design team. I asked Jeff D'Onofrio, our attorney, about that. He said, per the RFPs, page 3, geotechnical services are required to be included in the base fee proposal. So yes, Tecton owns geotech. Number 4, what is the procedure for the committee approving a design concept? Do we make a motion and vote, or is it less formal? Again, it's a response from our attorney. The committee, not to mention Board of Ed and OSCGR, must approve the schematic design prior to progressing to the design development phase, approve the DD prior to progressing to the construction document phase, and approve the 100% CDs prior to proceeding to bid. We will be, yep.
Doesn't the town council have to approve it also?
Actually, as I understand it, the Board of Ed doesn't even have to approve it.
Highly recommend it.
Right, and that's what I understand, but OSCGR does not require the Board of Ed or the town council to approve it, correct?
Right.
Right.
Not,
Okay.
not for one of the bid,
Not for the schematic design we're
not
talking.
schematic.
All we're talking is schematic design. But you want the Board of Ed to have ownership of this, and not to be coming back at some other point later and say we didn't know of it. But town council does not have to approve the schematic design.
In the past, they've always requested. Just asking.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely want to present it to them. We don't formally have to have them approve, but we'll have to see. We will present you with various design elements as we move forward. Does the committee take a vote on these? Again, a response from our attorney, and this is important. Design elements do not require a vote unless there's a disagreement or lack of consensus about the design elements. You don't want to have an issue when it comes time to approve the SD, DD, and CD, so it makes sense to tell the committee members to speak up if they disagree with design elements being discussed. So we'll be hitting a lot of design elements over this meeting. It's important that if you have some concerns or issues, bring it up now, discuss it. We want to be able to get to a point in August where we are saying we formally approve of this, and we don't want people to have concerns that are unspoken, before that meeting. What was the intent of the $1 million that was budgeted for energy initiatives? It could be anything from a photovoltaic farm to energy efficient cooking equipment to better insulation on the exterior of the building. I was on the school modernization committee, and they had closed up shop and put everything in, and Chuck was chairman of that group, before the $1 million was put in. That was done by the town council with Colliers pre-referendum and after school modernization. So I asked Vin, who was part of that, and his response, the intent of the additional $1 million is to exceed the Connecticut High Performance Building Standards. I provided below the section from the ed specs and highlighted the language that was used for both schools for the building systems. If you look further at the HVAC, lighting, and electrical system sections, you will see that's consistent with the discussions we have been having with our design and engineering professionals, including solar, geothermal, chill beams, building automation systems, emergency generators, etc. So it's not for any one thing. It is to be used as we are doing design to get the most efficient system that we can, and gave us some money to be able to do that.
It doesn't say what we're saying it says right there. It's not to exceed the high performance building standards.
It doesn't say that underneath me, is what you're saying.
It doesn't say that in the specs or anything. It's just an additional 1 million to
Right.
meet the standard.
But I think the intent was, we had to meet the standard, right? When you build the building, you have to meet the standard
choice.
for reimbursement. The $1 million was for an element that exceeded that standard. The way that I think you just framed it, Chuck, you correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like, well, we could use that $1 million to get up to the standard. But I think the intent was actually go beyond that.
Yeah,
how
I
you
guess it's
recall
not,
it?
it's not written, I guess, in like the section, but I guess this is from the specs, that it has to be used to
Yeah, I don't think
exceed the
it's,
standard.
yeah, I don't think it's said that way in the specs. I think the intent, as Vince and Jeff were working with Colliers, was, if we do the basic design, here's how much money we need. But let's throw in an extra $1 million at each building so that we can focus on more energy efficiency. So I don't think it was ever spelled out that it had to be above and beyond that, but I think that was, as I understand it, that was the intent.
I think it was
Discussion.
left to you.
When Colliers put together the budget would include what we needed to do to meet the standards. And so the discussion was, well, we want to do more than that, and then $1 million was added. So even though it's not stated that way in the ed specs, that's the way it was discussed.
I guess what I'm saying though is if you have two systems and one's more efficient and they both just meet the standard and one costs more, that $1 million can be used to use the more efficient standard more efficient system, even though it just meets the standard, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Not that it has to be like, well, because we have this $1 million, we have to go to the next level of whatever.
Yeah, no, it's not spelled out in any way at all. It's ours to deal with, and it gives us some extra finances to focus on some energy efficiency.
But it's
Um,
interesting how we apply it though. Do we, when we're doing our scoping for our pricing, and before we do our VE exercise, I mean, is that $1 million not in there? And then when we start doing our VE or whatever we're calling VE, everybody knows what we're talking about. Before we go into that exercise and we say, well, we've got too much money here on the mechanical side, we say, hold on a second, add another $1 million to it and see if we're over. Or how do you, or does that just go to extras like, hey, we're building a solar farm and we have $1 million for it? I think it's just a gray area, and maybe it's meant to be that way so that we have discretion. But it does seem unclear to me what the real intent was. The intent could have been, we want solar and this is going to pay for that, even though it's not required, or we want geothermal and this pays for that. Or is it just, we want better and it's going to pay for some element of better?
I think the third one is more of what it was, you know.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that how we use it will be up to us.
Sure.
And clearly, we have to keep an eye on the bottom line. And that includes the $1 million per building. So as we go through and price it, hopefully, the engineers are coming in with some ideas on, you know, the most efficient systems that we can get for the money. And when we price it, we find that we can afford it. But, you know, the bottom line is the bottom line. How do we decide if we want to go the route of adding a solar photovoltaic system? We decide to go that route. How do we decide if we own it outright? If we have it owned by a third party? Geothermal is also an open question of whether that is a cost-effective option for us. Good question. It's an open question for this committee. As we gather more information from our experts, we're going to have to make some decisions. You know, it's not something which obviously is decided in any way. Should we consider hiring a separate independent firm for third-party review of the entire design package? I did speak with Rich Sitnick from Arcadis, noted that his firm, the commissioning agent and the CM at risk, will do a review of the plans. He also stated that he thinks due to the size of the building, that a third-party structural review will need to be done, but he's checking on this. If the committee wanted to do something more than that, that would be up to the committee at some point to make a decision and determine if they wanted to spend the money for a further review.
I think we're gonna need the third-party structural review.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a threshold.
So that'll be done, but do you want a third party to look over all the plans and you know, when they're done? And again, that'll be something the committee can discuss and whether they want any additional review or input before we lock it down.
Spent a lot of time hiring two exceptional firms at a great cost.
Well, I have no idea how much it would cost, and that would obviously be part of the conversation.
Again, you think of the best author you know. When they're done, they're not done. They
And
have
then
editors,
there's,
proofreaders.
and we have a second set of authors to review it.
Well, no, you don't. We don't have licensed architects and engineers. At least I don't think so. I mean, does ONG and Arcadis, you have like peers? Is that a peer review, or is that are you reviewing it for constructability? Are we reviewing it just for?
We're doing constructability reviews of this sense.
So it's not so much as a design review as it is constructability. So something, a major code element because of a code change could be missed. You're not necessarily doing that, whereas PE for mechanical would be. And holy cow, where's our condensate? Or, oh my gosh, you can't.
Well,
Yes,
commissioning
yeah,
agent will be doing that.
Well, they're looking at, they even said when we were talking with them that they're looking at it for commissioning elements.
Yeah,
To
but
make
they
sure that
still
the
have,
sequence of operations is correct.
which is usually what gets screwed up.
Well, that may be one thing that gets screwed up. But, you know, if the switchgear is undersized, they're not going to pick that up.
Appreciate that explanation.
And it is something that we wouldn't be deciding at this point. You'd be looking at it towards the end of the design. But it's something to keep in mind as we move along.
I do agree that it would be something we would want, something, maybe not the final, but maybe like a 90% if we were to go ahead and do it. I just know that, you know, all the time you see it, a job has something's missed and it's a $250,000 change order, and then there's negotiations and meetings and all this kind of stuff, and I don't know that it would cost $250,000 to have a review, but it's.
That's a cost benefit analysis, and,
Yeah.
and this isn't my wheelhouse to be able to determine, you know, what's value versus not in that pursuit.
I do think it's something we should all just keep in mind for a later discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have a fixed, unmovable opinion, but I do have an opinion.
Yeah, I'd be curious if there are other, Jeff or Justin, are there other situations where you've run into where committees have brought in a third party?
You first. It's not uncommon to do a code review, a third-party code review as part of the completion of the construction document package. I don't know if the town of Cheshire, I'm gonna look at Will and Ryan for a second. Sometimes when we go through an application process, regulatory process, the town hires a third-party engineer to review the documents for stormwater, sanitary, all those things. Our commissioning agent also reviews building envelope and does do reviews at each part of each design part to offer comments. They're tracked in comments and we respond to them. And the third party, the threshold project requires us to have a third party structural review. So I don't exactly know what you're talking about a design review. I think you're probably talking about code related issues. So that has been done on other projects.
It may be considered like a ready check.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna mention. The state sometimes employs ready check, which is like coordination. They're not necessarily looking at code, but they're looking at coordination amongst all the various different trades, and they'll issue a list. But that it'd be much like the constructability review that ONG would do. So it sometimes overlaps.
Yeah, I don't want to pay for duplication. On the other hand, if there are things that get missed and you're able to pick those up now rather than deal with them as change orders later, it could be a financial savings. So that's something we'll keep in mind.
Keep thinking about.
Any comments on any of those questions or comments? Okay. Owners rep monthly schedule review.
Good evening, Jack Buck is sitting in tonight for Rich Sidnick, who was called away at the last minute. I frankly haven't had the opportunity to dig into the schedules, but what was in your packet was the pre-con schedule from ONG. So, Will, could you?
Do you want me to go on now, or?
It's next on the agenda. ONG pre-construction schedule.
Okay, so I had handed out, do you guys have a hard copy, or?
I sent everyone a copy.
I do have some hard copies, I did not bring this many.
Yeah.
But if you want to take some.
We could project it if you want, but
I have, I think I brought 15 hard copies.
well, there's enough for the committee members.
I had also handed out at the last meeting a pre-con schedule, but I had changed it slightly. So if anybody was able to review the prior one,
Throw that one away now, right?
yeah, you can throw that one away.
Okay.
It's, all I did was like duplicate some of the activities. So the purpose of this schedule is to get us to start construction. So you'll notice, at the tail end, I do have construction activities, but it's just a summary bar. It doesn't really mean anything. The sole purpose of this schedule is to track needed approvals, timelines of submittals, just trying to keep things on track so there isn't, we forgot about something, right? Because we only have so much time between now in the end of the design, to start construction. So the very beginning, the first page is milestones. This is just a high level. You're talking to somebody, you run into somebody at the grocery store. Oh, when do you plan on starting construction? Well, you go down, you see start work on site north and start work on site north end. So you have that data right at your fingertips. Oh, when do you think you're gonna start bidding? Okay, you can kind of see that date. That's October 10th. So this is the high level, just little dates that you know kind of where the project is. After that, it's professional services contracts, again, so we don't forget about people that need to be hired. I know the hygienist is on your list. The local code review contract, that's the one that Justin was just referring to. At some point, either the building inspector or the fire marshal have to review the documents before we go up to the state. So most towns, the building officials and fire marshals don't do that. I don't know how Cheshire is. And you would have to hire a firm that does that review. And then eventually you're gonna need to hire what's called special inspections, materials testing. That's another agency that the owner will be hiring. Of course, this will all be done through Arcadis. But again, just tracking them because we know they're coming and we don't want to lose sight. Flipping over to page 2. We have just a gray area, it's in green, but it says other items, smallware, tech, playground. Again, we don't want to lose sight of things, just kind of stretching things out. And then something that was mentioned during our interview process was the pre-detailing, which we highly, highly recommend on these two projects. It saves you at least 5 to 6 weeks for the start of construction by having that pre-detailing effort done early before we even go out to bid. It also flushes out any issues, design issues, and it provides much tighter bids because it actually develops a materials list. So anyhow, that's out there as well. Moving down, you'll notice we have the schematic design. So the programming is pretty much done for the most part. Then we'll get into these phases of design. So schematic design is what you were mentioning. And what's different on this schedule from what I handed out last meeting, and this is the only difference, is this blue where I separated between the north end and Norton to reflect the 2 August dates as far as, when this schematic design completion would be coming to fruition. After the schematic design comes design development. You'll see that starts. That's basically going to get us to the end of this year. And it's the same process. We have the design documents. Everybody does the reviews, the commissioning agent does the reviews, we do an estimate, we reconcile, we come to the building committee with where we are and recommendations and whatnot. And then we get to the construction documents phase, and then there's more reviews after we're teeing that up. After the construction documents, we just wanna, I know I have the wrong terminology, but anyhow, I'll change this for next one. But these are those precious meetings that we need to go to up to the state to, as we progress through the design, gotta go up and check in with them. So after the schematic design, there's gonna be a series of SDR meetings. It's called schematic design review. So we say meetings because we think that the state's gonna wanna have 2 separate meetings, one for each school. Same thing with the design development. And then the one that's the most critical is the one that precedes us going out to bid.
Have those state meetings been scheduled?
The SDR?
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge.
Not yet.
Rich to do.
Is that gonna be a problem, getting those scheduled on time? No.
We're missing the summer, so this is like right after Labor Day. And the schematic design review meeting, as well as the DDR meetings, do not hold up progress of the design. It's just a check-in with the state. It's the PCR that's the more critical one. So that's what's on the schedule. Next, below that is when we split up between the 2 projects, the regulatory approvals, because we want to keep track of the 2 schools independently of any sort of local or state agencies that also have input on the designs. And just want to, make sure we're tracking what applications they need, what deliverables are required. At some point, the P&Z meetings and all those regulatory approvals are going to show up. You see, you got the town approvals on there. So these are just things that we're going to start tracking and updating. I typically update the schedule on a monthly basis, and usually, you probably want to have it the first meeting of the month. And you can kind of see we're getting out there past the summer, but it's just a look ahead, a snapshot.
Yeah,
So
we had
that
worked it with
everybody keeps track.
Arcadis that they would do a budget review at the first meeting of each month. So that's what
Yeah.
So that's when we would want to keep it
And
all together.
invoices and all that. And then the very last page is when we're getting towards the tail end, where we're, getting towards the bidding and award. You can't see it on here, but there are, all these activities are tied to each other. What's red is critical, so those are the things that impact time. As we update this on a monthly basis, if we think we're losing track of things, we'll be making adjustments, but obviously the idea is to start working on site, early December 2024. And believe me, I'll be yelling very loudly if we start to get behind schedule, so. So that's pretty much it in a
This is
nutshell.
wonderful.
All right, I know it's a lot of information, but it's, again, just a tracking tool.
Question for you.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's been any discussion with the building department, but I know state gives them 30 days. It looks like there's less than 30 days here considerably. We've got 11 days.
For the building permit,
Yeah.
where are you?
Building department is, third page red.
Third page, right?
Second piece, 1, 2, 3. The first red section,
On page 4?
4 of 6. Yes.
Okay.
This is building, fire marshal, sewer. I don't know, it says building department. And then you have building permit, so I don't know if building permit is the issuing of the permit or if that's the.
We're kind of seeing them ahead of time. I can see what you're talking
You've got
about.
building department review for permits is actually starting on the 14th, and then you got, 6 days later, the building. permit.
Yeah, I'll move that out.
I can put some context to that. When we go to the state with our documents to get permission to go to bid, we need a code conformity certification signed by Building, Fire, Health 504. And in the process of reviewing the drawings ample to sign off on it, the officials are either doing a code review like they were issuing a permit, or we'd be using a third-party code reviewer who is going to go through all of those steps, all the plan review steps that a pre-permit review would look like. They're going to, in the case of a third party or the local officials, they'll come up with their list of exceptions. The design team will respond to those exceptions, and then the review, the questions, and the answers all get submitted with our request to go out to bid when we go to the state. With that in the box, so to speak, once we get the permission to go to bid, we can follow up with those officials and actually obtain the permit. They don't have to do their 30 days worth of review because they or the third party has done that upstream.
And where on here is that review, so that review is on the 9th instead of the 14th. So you've got that only 5 days. I just don't know if I'm reading it correctly.
It's just the building official has to see these documents before we can go up to the state, and we're planning on going to the state in September, and we're not trying to get a permit until towards the end of November. So in there
September,
is
November,
that
so
time frame that you're referring to. It's just not as meaningfully as
I
you'd like to
missed the
see it.
change from November to September.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really squishy because there's a lot of time.
No, that's fine.
You actually have building review going on in July and August of 2024, which is 3 months prior to when the building department's getting the set again. So you have local reviews being done in July and August.
Yeah, this is like
It's
wetlands. Yeah, these are all wetlands and getting ready for P and Z and all that.
Oh, it says here, fire marshal review, building inspector, this is regular reviews, building permit test. That's what you have written.
What's the activity level?
It's on page 3 of 6, under yellow. You have the construction building review, this is a estimate from the estimate set was done, you go into local reviews at that time. That's what this
Yeah,
says.
that's next year, yes.
Right. That's before all these red ones. So the building department is doing their review first.
We've had some jurisdictions that have issued a building permit based on the PCR review set. Because they know that we have a construction manager. I mean, Simsbury issued a building permit before we even had bids back. So, I mean, that will be a conversation with the building officials. Our priority is to make sure that the PCR review set goes well, so that we can get in front to get out to bid. So we will have check-ins with them, likely at the beginning of design development, beginning of construction documents, and then about 4 to 6 weeks out from completion of CDs, another one to say, hey, this is coming. we're gonna need a signature. As soon as you start asking these guys for signatures, it gets a little more real, and they take the reviews, very seriously, so.
And these are big projects for a town this size. We want to make sure that they're brought into the process as early as possible and they have as much time, so that they don't feel that they're being, rushed or forced into it.
But the same sign-offs that are needed, we need health department, right, to go up to PCR as well, so all the agencies need to bless these documents before we even go up to the state.
And I know, just having served on some other committees, that you can really get hung out there for long periods of time if any, issues come up last minute. So as much as we can be running things past our various officials in town, the better off we are. Well, thank you. This is very good. Any other comments or questions on the schedule? We'll keep an eye on this and make sure that we're sticking to it. And if I'm reading this right, they're saying that the project complete in February 8th. Did you see that? That's what it says, February 8th, project complete.
27.
Well, yeah. All right.
All right, moving on, you have budget reports based on transactions through the end of June. There is one area where we're going to make some adjustments. The value of the purchase order for the architect in each of the projects needs to be tweaked to include their reimbursable expenses. So there'll be a change in that number. But otherwise, you see we have no adjustments to date as of the end of June. We've also not expended any of the owner's contingency through the end of June. So we're still status quo on that.
Jeff, did you have that resolution?
We need to get the north end PO
Okay.
to make sure that the numbers, the town PO for Norton has the reimbursables on it. We need to see the north end PO as well.
So that may be something that we push off. The issue here is when we approved the Tecton contract, if you recall at that time, the motion had the specific amount of money that was in the overall proposed expenses. But within that, there's also a reimbursable expense. And therefore, since we had voted just on that total dollar figure, Arcadis has an issue with adding on the reimbursable amounts. We had run that by Jeff. He said, well, it was very clearly intended that way. It's, the way the contract is written, the RFQ or whatever, RFP rather. But what's her name, Amy, who's doing all the financial piece, wants to make sure, which when we get up to the state doesn't look and say, wait a minute, you approved X amount, but you're paying out X amount that you don't match. So we need to just do a short motion that would include the greater amount for that reimbursable, which isn't a huge amount of money, but it is something that Tecton is waiting to get paid. So this just came, we had, as I said, I had run some stuff between Amy, Rich Sidnick, myself, and Jeff earlier, and we had just said, okay, I think it's all set. And then Rich called me this afternoon saying we need a motion. But if we don't have the dollar figures and Jeff doesn't have the motion for us, then we'll have to push it off to the next meeting.
She sent two proposal summaries.
I just need to see the PO. He's walking.
Zach, brought my bike.
Sorry, guys. I'll give you my credit card. Next item, the hazmat RFQ. It's going under a couple of different names, I know it's, but I had sent you a copy of this.
This is the environmental.
Yeah, sorry, I'll use
Oh, I
your.
like that. That's
Yeah, as I said, it's had multiple names on it. The RFQ/P, it's combined, that we were sent, calls it a hazardous building material consulting services. Anyway, we have the copy here. If you have input on that.
Just one small one. We're asking for prices up front, but the only price that we don't have is one for an hourly when they find something that was not expected during demolition.
Where are you, Dennis?
I'm looking at the.
Oh, on the price, yeah. I'm looking at the.
I think, Dennis, that will fall under the second page of the pricing sheet, pavement monitoring services. There
Yeah,
are
that's-
hourly rates called for.
That's usually not monitoring though, because you need testing. Usually when you have an emergency, that's when they make their money.
Well, there are other testing unit costs in that portion of it as well. It's bottom of page 2.
So are you asking them to add a line in there, Dennis? Is that what you're?
Yeah, because all the monitoring that we're asking for is something that is basically advanced knowledge of.
Mhm.
OMG is demolishing Norton School, they open a wall, there's insulation everywhere on pipes.
I'm gonna be there every day anyhow.
Right, they'll be on site, but again, under the abatement monitoring line, there are hourly rates. So if there is something that's above and beyond what was identified in the scope, we can go back to that labor rate.
That's not monitoring.
Well, they're not gonna be doing any removal. This is,
No, I realize that. That's discovery and testing.
and we have these unit costs here for additional tests.
For the monitoring, not for additional.
So we can revert back to
Other costs.
independent laboratory analysis, the center of page 1. Those are the samples that they're gonna be doing as they develop the scope, as they test the building. And we can fall back on those same unit costs if it's required for them to test unforeseen materials.
We would point to that section to use.
I'd be more comfortable if we had a paragraph that
Yeah,
explained that.
clarify. Yeah, it's a good point.
Can you do some?
Okay, the wording, sure.
So is Rich editing this, Jack, or you editing this?
I got this from Rich, so he's got here.
Yeah, Rich is, you'll notice if there's any question, unlike you've had to do with all the others, any questions that come up, we're going.
Yeah, I saw that,
Rich
which
Sidney.
was welcome. But I didn't know if you wanted me to just insert like a little carrot in here now to, or you got that, Jack? I mean, it's
I've got that. I'll
yeah.
coordinate with Rich tomorrow. Make sure we
I
have-
had I modified it to include that they be delivered in sealed envelopes to Cheshire Town Hall, 84 South Main Street. Unless, that you think that needs to change, does it should get delivered to Arcadis? I mean,
No, that's fine, I'm coming to town hall.
yeah, that's why we've been doing that.
Because we still have to do the interviews. We have still.
Right. So they're received until 2:00 on, I'm not sure what date.
You don't have to do interviews.
We don't have to do interviews? We can just,
You can review statements of qualifications and decide,
Point.
put a short list and then send proposals, that's the way it's set up.
This is a combination RFQP, so
Yeah.
you'll have all the data, you'll have their qualifications as well as their numbers.
so as a committee, we could review that. It's not the same process where we have to pick 4, interview, and do all that.
Well, the process is you have to do an RFQ,
Right.
and from the statements of qualifications, you can select not more than 4 to send the RFP to. So what you'll do is, when you look at the responses to the RFQ, you'll then notify the firms that you've shortlisted to submit their proposals. That's the way it's set up.
Well, is this currently structured as a combo RFQP?
It is, but the way that it's set up is you'll be notified if it wants you to submit a proposal. So, just to save time.
Then the submitting on the proposals, can we just rank evaluate their qualifications that they provide initially? We don't have to do the interview process.
You don't have to do it right
And would you do the same thing in terms of rating them and then opening the
That's up to you.
prices?
That's up to you.
I know in the past, that's something that you
The
felt.
qualifications, the criteria in the statute for the qualifications are in the RFQ. So whether you want to do a weighted scoring, or whether you want to just sit around a table and say, okay, let's vote on who we think the most qualified firms are, and if you have a consensus, then you issue the RFP to them. And then once you get the proposals back, it's the same statutory process, but there's very big differences in the scopes of these very narrow, consultants versus the architect, the CM, and the owner's rep. So you don't have to interview. Nothing in the statute requires you to interview the architect, the CM, or the owner's rep. That's the way it's done, because it's the only way you can really determine
Right.
who you're going to work with.
Made a big difference.
Yeah, the people down there at every meeting that you're going to work with the next 3 years.
People in this room impressed us tremendously. So that had a
You don't
big
have to
impact.
interview these other consultants. It's not necessary. If
Okay.
you want to, you can, but it's not required by statute.
All right. So for the commissioning agent, we had 4 members who became a working committee and
Working group.
we don't want to use that
Not a
committee.
subcommittee.
He's always corrected me on that one.
Not a committee.
But that we had a working group who did that. It's not necessary, but is it something you could do?
If you want to do it that way, you can do it that way, sure.
Or we can do it as a full committee.
Sure.
All right. Any other issues or comments?
So Jeff, if you've got notes there, just please send those to Rich and we'll make sure they get it.
They're in the Google Doc. Let me make sure that, he
Did you-
shared. I thought he was an editor at some point.
Did you plug dates in there?
I started to.
Okay. All right, and I will leave that up to you to plug in some dates.
We haven't gotten to the, I would like some guidance around the dates. When do we want this RFQ submitted by? And then there are subsequent dates at the bottom of the document around anticipated issuance of RFQ, RFP, statement of qualifications due July, building committee selection of shortlist.
I think you gotta back into it off of the schedule.
I mean, I can work that out if you guys are comfortable with that.
Yeah, back into it off of the end date of August 1st. Looks like.
Okay.
And then we're on track.
August
Council approval.
August 1st is just on the schedule.
Okay,
Does town council have to approve that?
It says it in here, town council approval, but at NGSBC, a selection of firm will be August 1st. Is that what we're saying? That's the August meeting?
It's just August 1st on the schedule is all I'm saying, but we want it to be as early as possible, like August, end of July, because we wanted to get in there in August, right?
Yeah.
That was the
It's
original.
the 13th right
Wait,
now.
town council meeting in August.
town council meeting in August is on the 8th.
It's moved to Thursday the 10th.
Yeah, we meet on Thursday, the 10th.
Yep.
The town council meeting is on the 8th.
No, it's on the 10th.
Got moved to the 10th.
Oh, it got moved?
Yeah, it was moved Tuesday night.
Oh, okay, all right. So that's the same night as our meeting.
Can we like approve it and run upstairs?
This just in.
That
All
has
the
been
press
done.
is-
We could just be in the back corner.
Yeah, well, we could do an earlier meeting and then.
I'll lean out the window upstairs.
Throw a
Just
basket
say
with
to put it
broke.
on the schedule at the first part of the meeting, and then you don't have to have an extra meeting. So, all for not the extra.
Amen. I get an amen. So we're looking at August 10th.
So that's
Is
August
the
10th.
selection of firm, that they don't need a little bit more breathing room to, what's our meeting prior to August 10th? That's the end of July.
27th.
The 28th, Thursday. Oh, did I, I did.
2 weeks from today.
27th.
Yep, 27th.
I mean, is that, I don't know that we can do that by the 27th either though, right?
Well, you're at the 13th now,
Yeah,
so.
I mean, even if this goes out tomorrow,
I'm just saying, whenever it goes out, we get the qualifications and everything back, we can just shortlist somebody on the 27th.
How
And then it
important
goes
is
out and
this
they
to
gotta
have
get
this
it in
in?
by the,
We were just trying to get in before the summer, before the summer ends, just to kind of poke around, but
Well, if we go in the other direction, if we issue the RFP tomorrow, July, RFQ, excuse me, thank you. Tomorrow's the 14th. And then how responsive are these firms? How difficult is it to respond to this? How much time will they legitimately need?
I'd give them 3 weeks because it's the summer.
I think we're gonna be hard pressed to try to get something.
I think
in 2
realistically,
steps.
you're not gonna get to the town council in time.
If our goal is August 10th, then I recommend we stay with the structure the way Rich has got it worded now, where anyone who responds is gonna give us qualifications, and then they're gonna give us pricing and as 2 separate documents.
That's not the way I worded it though. I have it, we're gonna shortlist, and then we're gonna send them.
Could we, in the interest of trying to hit the 10th, could we do it where they just put the pricing in a separate envelope, you review the qualifications? If somebody doesn't pass muster, you never open their envelope. For those that do, you open the envelope that night, once you've created your list of most qualified firms.
Yeah.
And then you can act, at that point. We don't have, it would potentially within a week, you get the information again with a proposal, since they're already familiar with what you want, but we don't have that week. So if we can tweak the wording and do it as a combo.
Okay with that.
We don't have a week if we're timing it with our.
If we're gonna massage the
If we just
language
had
for that.
another Working group that could review it, everybody would.
well, if you send it out tomorrow, like he just said, you get them back.
Can I send it out tomorrow? If we're gonna, do we have enough time to change the language to what you guys are suggesting?
I would, in order
You get them
to meet
back.
the state's requirements, we've got to post it on the state website.
Right.
So I would think to do edits and get it posted tomorrow is probably more
A little
than
ambitious.
we can bite off.
Do you think we could hit it for Monday?
I think that's a more realistic
we're
target.
only gonna have.
Alright, so
So have it do in 2 weeks, which would be,
2 weeks is enough time.
yeah, right. Yeah. 3 weeks from Monday is what they.
They're still looking for work. They're anxious to get it
The
done.
rush is to get it maybe so.
Well, Mark was just suggesting, well, maybe we could just get them in at Christmas, but that's like 1 week, it's, what we're trying to do is we're trying to characterize the building so that we're carrying the right numbers from the beginning, instead of being a surprise, like, there's more abatement than we thought.
how much time does it take for them to do that? Is it something that can be done, in September on Jewish holidays, maybe? I don't know when the Jewish holidays are. I'm sure my wife wouldn't be pleased. You guys know?
Monday, I know, one's on a Monday, Kipper's on a Monday.
Yeah.
The other on a
On
weekend.
a Saturday, yeah.
Yeah.
The other one's on Saturday. Is that I don't know how involved that process is. Is it days through the building? Is it?
It's realistically, it's probably a 3-4 day effort
Okay.
to go through it sample. So Monday's the 17th, 3 weeks from Monday is the 7th. If they responded at the 7th, and you had a meeting, either a working group that looked at it in advance of your meeting on the 10th, or if the group convened and did it all on the 10th.
If they did it, can we do it have a working group on the 7th? And that way the council has it to approve on the 10th. Because if we're doing it, at 5 o'clock on the 10th, we're gonna run it upstairs, and I don't know how comfortable the council will be on that.
Well, even if a working group
The
looked at it
problem-
on the 7th, the committee still got to make the formal vote.
The problem with doing it on the 10th at the town council is what are we putting on the agenda? They're not gonna know the name, it's a special meeting, they can't amend the agenda.
Oh, it's a special meeting,
Yeah,
because they
because it
moved it
was
to the
moved from
10th, yeah.
Tuesday to Thursday, so now it's a special meeting.
I don't think you're gonna be able to rush it
File
through
a
this stuff.
resolution and just say, all the wording other than TBD for the name of the firm.
They don't like to do that. Doesn't give the public any notice of what you're doing.
And then they're not meeting again in August, right? Done till September.
No, that's it.
Could ask them to do a special meeting.
They've really resisted doing anything, even when we were hiring architects. I was asking them if they would do it.
It could be remote, 5 minutes.
Yeah, Sean came back to me saying, no, they only want it done at the first meeting of the month.
I mean, this is like Jeff is saying, man, this is rubber stamp, like the ultimate short meeting, remote.
If you all were to have a special meeting on the 7th, when the information comes in, or the 8th or the 9th, and then be able to, I don't know how quickly they can amend the agenda for the town council, but to have it.
Here's the other, we move our meeting from the 10th to the 7th. That week, we could have our own special meeting, and just do the reverse of them.
Take that.
You think you can do that? Yeah. I mean, that's an option.
Just make it our regular meeting.
Right,
Put the
yeah.
one so-
Well, it becomes a special meeting when you change the date, but.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But if it's a special meeting, you can only have one item on the.
No,
agenda.
you can have,
No, you can do it.
you can have a legit
You can have
agenda.
a full agenda.
That's what the council's
Yeah,
doing, right?
you just can't, because it's a change from the regular date, you can't amend the agenda once it's published.
That wasn't my reading of the Freedom of Information, but
That's it, baby.
Hmm?
That's the law.
What?
Once that agenda is
Right,
posted for that.
But you can
special
have a
meeting, it
full
can-
agenda.
Sure, absolutely.
But when are they posting the one for the 10th? That's, if it's at, before the 7th, we still,
I think the end of the
Friday, it
executive
gets
session.
posted usually.
so we'd have to move our meeting.
I'm sorry, the 10th is Thursday, right?
Yeah.
So probably Tuesday.
Oh, so we might make it.
No, because they're gonna post it, before close of business on that day, typically.
for
But
close
they-
of business on
if they,
the 8th.
Oh, right, yeah, so if we had it
Yeah,
on the
so we did it
7th,
by
Meet
7.
on the 7th, you should-
meet on the 7th, post it on the 8th.
8:30 a.m. We have it.
So are people
Just for coffee.
okay for the 7th to have our meeting that week instead of the 10th?
Let's do it.
fine with me. Does that work for everyone?
Alright, so cross that
Work for
bridge.
you guys?
So, well, that- so we get-
7th is pretty difficult, but
Yes, I just saw.
'Cause the 10th was-
7:00.
The 10th was the day that we were shooting for approving schematic designs,
right.
so you're pushing that. Yes, Vince?
I just got a message from Tim Slocum, the chair of the council. He
Yes?
said, Vin, I'm watching your meeting. I didn't know it was my meeting, by the way. I'm just
John,
reading
is
what
that
he
you?
wrote. He said, cannot imagine that the town council can't accommodate a special meeting to take care of this deadline concern. So, sounds like the council's.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Big brother's watching.
So then let's still aim at the 7th for the,
Standard qualifications, the 7th.
Well, if they can do a special meeting, we can continue to meet on the 10th, and then they
Right.
can do a special meeting right after that, a short special meeting the week of the 14th.
Or after we vote on it, they just text in immediately.
I'll text Vin. Except Vin will be on vacation. Oh wait, that was the
Because,
7th.
because I think it's important that
We're doing-
the architects have the time to be able to get this material prepared for us for the 10th.
Yeah.
And we're pushing
Absolutely.
it back for the purpose of this one item, when the bigger issue is getting the architectural plans and the schematic design finished.
That's a very good point.
So I would prefer not to move the meeting on the 10th. We can approve this on the 10th. We can ask the town council to then have a very short special meeting sometime the week of the 14th to approve it. Okay? And you plug that in.
So what I have in terms of the anticipated schedule, issuance of RFQ/P, July 17th, assuming, Rich can square that away and we can get it out on it. SOQ due August 7th. Building committee selection of shortlist / selection of firm. Because when we identify the shortlist, we will subsequently then open their proposal. And that'll occur on August 10th.
Next line should be on the 7th.
The submission of proposals by shortlist is also the 7th of August. Then the selection of firm, I think is already addressed August 10th. But I'll do that anyway. and then town council approval of NGSBC. I can just say to be determined there, right? Next,
Yeah,
next scheduled meeting.
we would need to talk
Mid-August.
Yeah. mid-August, something like that. And we'll talk to the town council about doing a very quick special meeting just to approve it.
Okay,
All right.
thanks all.
Broadcasting these meetings really pays off.
Thank you, you too.
All right, so we're all set. Can I have a motion to approve the hazmat RFQ/P as amended?
So moved.
So moved. Second?
Second.
Any other discussion? If not, then all those in favor? All right, thank you. Moving right along. Architects, engineers' recommendation regarding sustainable systems.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We do have a brief 4-hour presentation. So we're kind of going to cover all the bases as part of this this presentation, including in the packet that we handed you is kind of our standard roster of historical meetings. We have held 2 working group meetings since the last time that we met to go over site improvements and safety and security. We know that we needed to regroup with you on the MEP or building systems. And I think what we'd like to do is get right into the presentation because we cover all those and sharing it on the screen. Before we start that, we have a couple of, we have a full team here today. So I'd like to introduce some additional members from our team that you've all met before, but also so Tecton, Banesh, and Kohler Road. So you guys know me and Jeff, and you know Antonia, but Antonia, if you want to introduce yourself and then Ernest.
Sure. Antonia Ciavarella. I'm an architectural designer at Tecton Architects.
Ernest Poncino, senior designer with Tecton.
Francisco Jerez, Colorado, senior associate mechanical engineer.
Bill Walter, engineer with Finish.
Craig Raz, you met me last meeting.
Yeah.
Brian Santoro with Upper Bennington.
So we got mechanical engineer, civil engineer, mechanical engineer. So we're kind of, they can fight amongst themselves in each corner of the room here. So just a brief agenda up on the screen. We want to just circle back on some of our standard project baselines, the summary, the mission statement, and some of the inspirational or precedent imagery that we have shown you before. So we'll try and be quick to go through that. Then we want to get into the review of the north end schematic design, including some of the site design and landscape elements, safety and security. Those will be high level. We're not going to get into the details of floor plans and safety strategies from there, but just so you understand what kind of what considerations we're looking at.
We'll be moving into more detail on safety and security, but that's something, as we've talked about, goes, we do an executive session. We'll be doing that tonight.
We do have a number of slides to recap the mechanical system design that we went over at our last meeting, as well as a formal recommendation for implementation of the mechanical system. Then really the fun part of the project is getting into the site and building an exterior massing. We do have a couple of hard copies printed at a scale on the table here. So when we get into those, we may get up and point to things on the drawings on the table. We also have some 11 by 17s that are part of your packet to give you a slightly more manageable drawing format to look at. So this, as we had indicated at the last meeting and talked as part of the schedule, today we're focusing on the north end. So a reminder of some of our project parameters. We know that this has the birth to 3 component as well as the kindergarten to 6. So slightly larger building and student population from the Norton School. Similarly, slightly larger building area and overall project cost. We reviewed with you before some of our think tank sessions where we've developed our mission statement. We did some visioning, started collaging some precedent imagery and kind of mood imagery. So what we'd like to do is just remind everybody of our think tank mission statement. We're doing this for every child in the future of the Cheshire community so that they can feel a connection and sense of belonging to their school community and ultimately be drawn in and love learning. It's always a nice slide to kick off the discussion with. So a reminder of some of our inspirational imagery drawing from the community in the north end of town, as well as some precedent imagery, really kind of drawing on that farm and field concept, which in every meeting, in every stakeholder discussion, there's always been some gravity to this concept. So we have had a focused discussion on site design with the working group, some high-level ideas. We know that we want to preserve the open space and embody the farm and field concept. We want to treat the stormwater management system in a sustainable way so that we can demonstrate and it can become part of a teaching tool on site. We want the building and the plantings to blend in with the context of our relatively open field that we're building on. We know that especially the Darcy contingent, we have a very strong direct precedent for some of our design direction for playgrounds. And that's just some imagery of both what you have and also some exploratory play precedents. We've gone over in a working group saying just some base materials that are part of our overall basis of design for site, including establishing a site lighting package, some paving, hardscapes, and some of our landscape items. Now, I'll stipulate that the lighting is something that during design development we'll also need to get into what the standards will be district-wide, right? So we want to make sure that we're honoring the systems that you have in place so that you're not buying unique lighting fixtures to keep in attic stock. So as we have some slides to go over the updated site plan a little bit later, but I just wanted to bring this up as a touchstone from our working group meetings. And as part of your packet, you do have presentation summary slide decks from both the site working group meeting as well as the safety and security working group meeting, and those presentations are also on the working group Google Drive. So if you need a little bit more detail from that. As the chair had mentioned earlier this week, we had our safety and security meeting as part of the working group. So some of our core components that that become embedded in our design are, one, the principles of CPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design. In other words, how can we position the site and the landscape elements to be natural ways that we focus circulation within the site, maximize visibility, and prevent any threats from approaching the building. We know that as a baseline, we need to have a secure entry control, and that extends to the technical systems as well as our man trap that is at our main entry. The ability to lock down and compartmentalize areas of the school through a door hardware and lockdown system. So again, kind of leveraging some of the technology. Positioning classroom doors and visibility into the classrooms in a way that allows teachers and students to shelter in place, but also promotes visibility for first responders. So that's part of a central component, and that goes into the glass discussion. Also goes into the hardening of the exterior and incorporating school guard glass at all of our at-grade glazing. And also cameras and security and access control. That's the technological companion to the environmental considerations. Okay, so this was a slide that would basically summarize everything that I just said. Some strategies that we can use.
Yeah, and as Justin mentioned, more detail will be provided in the executive session.
Yep.
Yep.
So building systems, so Craig, this is your show here to summarize. We have some of the slides that we reviewed at the last committee meeting, as well as some additional information. So go ahead, Craig.
All right, so as we talked a little bit last time, we're looking at two different potential options. You know, we talked about fossil fuel building using gas of some sort, propane, natural gas, or decarbonization, which is you should build fossil fuels, all electric type building. I kind of presented this before, pros and cons, a little bit more about initial costs, energy efficiency, energy use intensity, maintenance, and space within a building. And we talked about the chill beams. The two that are really identified here, chill beams and central plant, are something that's consistent across both options, whether it's decarbonization or fossil fuels. And we're going to really focus on the chill beam approach, which is applicable to everywhere in the building except your cafeteria and your gym. Your gym and your cafeteria would get a more traditional air handling type approach because of large volumes, large amount of air, where a chill beam approach really is not the most appropriate for that particular option. Also, with any of these options, whether it's a decarbonization or a fossil fuel, use of radiant floor warming is still applicable for the pre-K and kindergarten spaces.
Chill beam system would work even in a media center if it's 2-floor.
It can, yes. Yes, it can. Yep. So remember, the key focus on energy use intensity, we talked about energy and where some of the monies can go. The lower your EUI, the more efficient your building is from an energy perspective. And energy use intensity is kBTU per square foot per year. That's how the units are used. Okay, the lower the number, the better. So fossil fuels, pros and cons. Go ahead, next. Yep, pros and cons. So fossil fuels, it's clean burning. Natural gas is very clean. Condensing boilers don't have a lot of maintenance because there's fewer pieces of equipment. You can have centralized equipment in one location. Condensing boilers are very efficient, especially when you use low temp water, and the building energy code now requires low temp water. Kitchen options of fossil fuel, you have gas or propane options that are available, and that discussion has to happen. If you don't have natural gas, you could go propane. It would be a lower first cost compared to a decarbonized type system. You can't offset some of the electric produced with PV. You wouldn't offset your gas usage, but you still could do PV to offset your electrical consumption of the building, right? And it can also be used very well as chill beams. What are the cons? Well, carbon emissions. You burn natural gas, you emit CO2. Typically have a higher EUI. They're not the most efficient approach at a building with the natural gas approach. It's against the current green initiatives that are out there right now that you hear all over the place. Could be a very high first cost with North End because of the expansion of the gas service to bring it to. That's a big number that could be used to offset a decarbonization type system. And the school requires CO detection throughout for carbon monoxide because you have a fossil fuel in the system. That's required from the state.
That number that you have there for the gas line, is that just something that you plucked out of the air? Or is there something from that?
No, it's not plucked out. It needs to be substantiated with Eversource, but it's kind of taken from other things and the base of where it has to come from. That's what we understand. It can go up or down depending on what the utility company actually provides with that information that's available.
So it's a couple things. Yeah, yes, you have $1 million in the line item on your budget in the original project, but we did do an analysis and we did share with the CMR and validated by Mark. So on a past project where we needed a gas line, similar distance, this particular distance is about 2,900 linear feet, validated by our civil engineer. So about 2,900 to 3,000 square feet, linear feet, excuse me, to get to the site. We used on the past projects as a budgeting exercise, $250 linear foot. For this exercise, if you do that math, it's about $275 because that project is finished with construction. It's the Brookfield project, right? So that's what we use for budgeting because that's what we had to use at the beginning of the project. The benefit, and we don't necessarily know. What happens typically is that the gas company will then do an ROI analysis to understand, all right, who am I picking? What's your gas usage, which Greg will provide? What are the customers that will likely pick up along the way? And then they'll calculate it, and that number will likely come down. But at this point, to give you an example, just, and I'll stop. That ROI analysis isn't gonna come until probably, to be honest with you, it came late in construction because it's the utility company. So we're cautioning against, and we coordinated with ONG what they've seen on other projects. From a budgeting perspective, I don't think you should be reducing that cost per linear foot because you don't know what that ROI is gonna be. So that's kind of our baseline thought on how we arrived there.
Where would it be coming from? Where's it tap into it? Like,
Do you remember?
where's that 2,900 feet away?
It is up this road on Marion Road. It's at the first intersection. I forget the cross street that it's sitting on.
Like West Johnson?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
It's up Marion.
It's pretty far up the road.
And that's not
Gonna pick up anything.
No, that's all off, anything off-site outside the property boundaries is not reimbursable. That's the other, so whatever you're getting for reimbursement, think of that when you calculate that value, right? Because if you're getting
50%.
50%, let's say, it's really $1.5 million in dollars, right? In true value, if you put that $1 million into the project,
Single way to do it.
right? I have an agenda.
It's hard to take math.
But so there was a lot of thought. We did coordinate, but that's the backstory to how we got. I don't know how the previous group, how Colliers got to their number, but that's how we got to our number.
All right, that's
Okay.
So MEP options decarbonization, all electric, very similar, Joe Beam and central plant VAV, rooftop air handler or indoor air handler. We can do a couple other things. This is all using geothermal wells. Ground source heat pump, geothermal, which is actually most efficient. But one of the big things about that, it requires a lot of space within the building because you have a lot of these decentralized pieces of equipment that are put all throughout, which requires closets, et cetera, which takes up usable floor space we could use in other programs. So it's something it's a great system, very efficient, but it really affects the overall square footage of your building and what your program is. Very efficient and a relatively good cost. So we're still focusing on chill beam here, but using geothermal as a heat rejection source. That'll be completely renewable, and we can get both heating and cooling with pressurized units inside. Okay. Again, same thing. We can do the space heating with this for the pre-K and K. And the gym and cafeteria still be done. If we go geothermal, would be a water to air heat pump. Or if we go water to water, we can still put regular air handlers. A combination of the two, it depends where the budget comes in. So that's our options. Both will do very efficient and take care of the conditioning and heating needs of the spaces. Next, so pros and cons. So benefits. First big one, zero carbon emission. Your wells are maintenance free. There's nothing to do for your wells once they're in. Basically, they're in forever. We can centralize the equipment. With geothermal, if we go with the chill beam and the water heat pumps, very sustainable. The lowest EUI options that's available between fossil fuel and decarbonization. No CO detection required because there is no fossil fuel unless you do something with your kitchen. If you do put propane or something, if you stay all electric, you wouldn't need that. You can do offsets with PV, help with your overall utility costs over time, and possibly get down to net zero if so desired, if the program really gets us to that point. Again, it works well with chill beams. So really the cons, the first one is the cost of wells. Your well field is your biggest cost you have in this. Your generator is also a capacity issue as far as for heating. You have to deal with the electrical production. But what we do in those cases, particular things, we don't size the generator for full protection. We size it just for a portion, and we roll around the building to maintain your building so you don't have a freezing condition, so you don't have to pull full back for that.
Do you have a larger service for the building or no?
No, because your air conditioning with electric anyway, it's the same service size. It doesn't grow. That's a benefit. There's no growth in electrical from that point of view. You're just using electricity to heat in the winter. Okay.
Any sense of what the cost for those wells would be?
It could vary. We've been seeing the cost of anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000 per well. And what that means, that's a total cost. That means the well system, the well field, piping brought into the building. That's where we've been seeing it on the last 10, 12 jobs in that range.
And how many wells would we need for the school?
For this one, we're 101, 102 in that range. And that's where we are right now. when we start out a project, we size the well field based on a rule of thumb, what we've seen. And if we're gonna go forward with a geothermal system, we recommend you get a test well done. Test well will tell us what the thermal conductivity of the ground is, how deep the bedrock is, so we know the casing, so we control the cost, and we can then right size the well field. Typically, our well field goes down after schematic once that test is done, because once we put it into a geothermal program, based on our model, it'll tell us exactly what we need, the longevity of it, what our temperature rise is going to be, and we can right size the well field instead of just putting a rule of thumb.
We have enough.
What does a well field look like on a site? Like,
That's what I was
what's
gonna
the
ask.
Well field will be, you won't see nothing, it'll be grass, it'll be on the parking lot.
Oh,
gates.
what's like the array look like as far as?
Oh, array is typically done on a 20 by 25 array, 20-foot stagger. What you do, you take a 20 by 20 array and offset it 10 feet, so you get staggered between the wells. It gives you much more efficiency between the wells. That's the minimum you want to use for a well field dimension.
And where would you tend to put those wells on the site?
We put it under the soccer field. So it's about 44,000 square feet.
This one?
Yeah, or actually, no.
It won't be fully under the soccer field,
It-
this one, because the sewer easement that runs through there.
Yeah,
So I had to kind of shift it and run it.
Yeah, we can spread them out, but the wells are buried 5 feet below the ground. When they dig the wells, they cut them, and they're 5 feet down, and all the piping is running that 5 to 3 foot range. So you don't even see it. The only you may see if there's a vault outside, you may have a sewer manhole on top to get to the vault. That's all you'll see. There's nothing else out there.
There's no equipment or anything outside for the
Nothing. It's no moving parts.
And in the building, it's basically pumps.
Building the set of pumps that circulates your geothermal loop to pressurized equipment.
Is there any maintenance or do things fail? I mean, everything fails, but I mean, what do you expect over the course of 20 years? You have to redig
Your
some
well
wells? or-
field will outlive everyone in this room. It's 50 years. There's really nothing going to go bad. Can something fail? Yes, but the chance of it's all HDPE pipe. It's all fused and welded. It's all tested. Like tested before it's buried. There's really nothing to fail on.
The other recent schools that this has been done in, is this a regular thing, the wells, or?
It's
geothermal?
becoming, because a lot of municipalities are going net zero as their basic design. That's really one of the only ways you can do it. I think there are other technologies go all VRF, but the town does not want VRF even considered here, so we're not even going to talk about it. There are air to water heat pumps that's possible. That's newer technologies coming out that you don't have to do geothermal for. Not as efficient in the Northeast because you don't get a lot of heat out of air when it's 0 degrees outside.
Yeah, right.
And it's a big reduction, so you end up oversized, or you use electric backup, which makes the heater spin a lot faster. So yes, there's most places that we're seeing are using geothermal.
So this seems to be the most
It's the way to
choice,
go.
yeah.
But now, you got to think about it. Your schools are in that size where it's appropriate, it's practical. 80 to 110, 120,000 square feet. You start putting high schools 230, 260. It's not impossible, but your well field gets very large, and it's a very large cost. If it's in a budget, not a big deal. And a lot of it comes to really, do you want to be sustainable? You want to be clean? You want to be efficient? That's the way to go, and you just don't have that maintenance to deal with over time. That's the nice thing about geothermal.
That sounds attractive to me, the whole maintenance piece, yeah.
That's one big piece you don't have to deal with. Boilers, you have to maintain them. An air-cooled chiller, you have to maintain. Now, the compressorized equipment still requires maintenance, but you're not dealing with that heat rejection source. It's a passive, and it's a good story to tell too.
When we mentioned net zero, this doesn't get us to net zero. You need solar as well, right?
Oh no, to do net zero, you have to offset the energy produced on site. I'm only mentioning there, PVs gives you that option, okay? And it's talking about PV, the ed specs talk about, there's a line item in there that says PPA. But if you do consider it, I gave these costs last time are different type. We don't want to be a code minimum building. We would never even consider PV for code minimum to offset. It'd just be too expensive. But if we get our building design geothermal, we're going to put this in our EUI between 25 and 20 in that range. And that shows you your PV arrays between 674 and 843 kilowatts. And some rough order of magnitudes. Now these costs are actually used based on the last project we just did. So these numbers come from a project just recently installed as far as use it to kind of extrapolate. But it's something you can consider, and you don't need to go net zero. You can put a PV array on your building that would just offset a portion of your building. It could be an educational tool, it could be anything. It's just something to consider. We're not pushing it one way or the other. It's just for education and for further discussion. Okay? But when you're doing an all-electric building, because you're tied to electrical rates, and what did Eversource just do the first 6 months? They jacked up the kilowatt hours to 24 cents, right? That's a big burden when you're doing an electric building. But if you had PVs, it completely offsets that. You wouldn't be paying that kilowatt hour. You'd be paying less, only what you didn't produce. So there's a big potential savings. And PVs, again, are passive.
Eversource just reduced it again.
They did know it was only a 6-month thing, so it just came back down. But it's still a great opportunity, right? UI didn't do it. UI is charging 30 cents. They got a net zero project in New Haven.
Really?
We got the bills for 30 cents a kilowatt hour. It's what's costing all. It's a lot of money.
Right, what's a typical life for a PV?
Typically 25 years. Yeah, if you do a PPA, you're going into a 20-year contract where you'll pay them. Remember, a PPA, all a PPA does is they finance your PV installation for you, and you pay them for the electricity they generate. And what they typically do is first 5 years, they'll fix a value. So say they'll sell it to you for 9 cents, right? Then after year 5, it escalates up at fixed percentage till year 20. And then at year 20, you own it outright typically, and then it's all free to you at that point. Otherwise, you're paying a reduced rate. It's typically much less.
But we could go with a geosystem and just have the design to later add in
Absolutely.
the PA.
Yeah, we would design space in the switchgear for future addition to that.
And that would be up to the school system at some point in the future,
That's correct.
however they wanted to add that in.
And that's very common for a lot of municipalities to do so.
So just build in the infrastructure for it. And
That's correct. We put it in the switchgear so it's there, and all you're doing is putting your system on and plug it in.
so that's a long continuum of things we could do. You just go full PV or
Correct.
infrastructure or nothing.
That's correct. That's correct. You have a lot of options.
What do you mean by the quantum generator capacity? What's that?
If you do an all-electric building, your generator will get a little larger if you're heating with that, because you got to use electricity to produce heat. So you're using more energy when you run electrical heat. That's why. If you had just a boiler, right? You're running natural gas at that point, and you run a boiler which is much less motor loads, so your generator can actually be smaller to support the loads that are necessary to provide backup heat. Where you're running compressors which have a higher demand and hence a bigger generator.
But that's only if you're using the generator for strictly freeze protection, right?
Only for freeze protection, not for maintaining building operations. Now, with this school, this wants to be a warming center, right? That's the thought process. So the generator decides to support the services to feed the warming center, whether it's an electric building or not. So you have to take that into consideration.
That's where it goes on.
That's where it gets a little bigger, to support that. No, it's not a shelter. It's not a shelter.
Who
Completely different.
determines what part of the building is used as a warming center?
Us as a group.
Well, it wouldn't be, it'd be the
Or
town.
the
in some
town,
way.
what they want to use.
So in other words, as you're doing the design, that might be cafeteria, gymnasium, kitchen, but all the classroom wings might not be part of that warming center.
Correct.
They would be on that
That's correct.
gym.
Just that polling thing to make sure
Yeah.
they stay above freezing.
It
Remember-
is a discussion item that we did in our last meeting, we did talk about. There may be a need to go beyond having this building just operate, if we lose power. If we want to set it up as some type of a shelter, warming center, cooling center, because we've lost power for days here in town. It is on the north end of town, which right now we only have Cheshire High School, as our shelter, so to speak. It's not a full Red Cross emergency shelter.
Well, it would make sense to do it, but obviously we don't necessarily want to do it for the whole building.
Well, it's
So
a
if you
discussion
do
point,
it-
yeah,
if you do
I
it for just
agree.
parts of the building, it would be a lot
Decision will have
cheaper.
to be made, though.
And I did mention, even if with this rolling heat, the way we're designing buildings today and the envelope being sealed so well, they don't lose a lot of heat. Like the old buildings, they don't leak. So they retain their heating, their value much longer time. So you really wouldn't have to run your heat. And plus you reduce your temperature down to 50 instead of maintaining 70. You're not gonna lose your building. And it's a nice thing about a super insulated structure. It's not over insulated, it's just the construction techniques are so much better than these.
Whatever you know.
Okay, and we gotta set up this meeting too with Eversource in the next 3-4 weeks. And next, so, I mean, here's our system types: chill beam, centralized rooftop, or indoor air handler, or water to air heat pumps. Some pros and cons versus the two. So chill beams, they take up less space. All the chill beams are located in the ceiling. Very short height, so you don't need big ceiling cavities. Very efficient. You move more energy through pipe than you do through ductwork. What you move through a 1-inch pipe is equivalent to what it takes an 18 by 18 duct. So for cooling with rooftop PAV, you need an 18 by 18 duct to do the same thing a 1-inch pipe will do for chill beams. So a lot less space being utilized to do what you need. Engineered room control. Every single room has their own control. Okay. Great IAQ. Each space gets a dedicated outside air delivery to operate through the chill beam. So your indoor air quality, your ventilation is designed for the room, and it's always fresh. There's no mixed use type ventilation where you're taking return air and recirculate it back in. It's always 100% outside air. Smaller equipment, better for dehumidification because we can control the temperatures, and a very low energy use intensity, as I mentioned. What's a con? There are limited manufacturers on the market that do this. It's not like I have 20 manufacturers I can go to. There's 3 or 4 that we can use, but it's a smaller pool. Condensation could be an issue, but to mitigate that, we make sure we control our dew points within the building, and we can provide drain pans in the chill beams, so we don't have to worry about condensation issues. So that's not going to be a concern. I mentioned generator size because if we go chill beams with DOAS and all electric, we'll have that. If we don't, with the fossil fuels, smaller, it'll still be fine. But then that'd be actually a plus. Centralized rooftop, still can get individual control. Possible lower first cost, possible. And it could be if we go gas-fired rooftops, that becomes an option. If we end up putting chillers in, it may not be a lower first cost. It's a possible. If you're centralized, you have less piece of equipment to maintain, so it can be low maintenance. Some cons, more space required, bigger ceiling cavities required in order to get more coordination required to get all services above corridors, etc. Potential noise from the units. You put a big rooftop on, vibration transmission to the building is always something you have to worry about, whether you put vibration curbs or not. Filter changes, more filter change with more equipment, and higher energy use intensity. They use more energy because they're moving a lot of volume of air, a lot of fan energy, higher energy. Okay. Water to air heat pumps, very high COP, which means for every 1 unit of electricity you put in, you get 4 units out. Very efficient. Okay, so 4 to 1, 5 to 1, not possible. Still can get individual room control because you can zone the heat pumps with dampers, zone dampers to make them individual. Good for IAQ because you're still using DOAS similar to the chill beams. And again, this is the lowest EUI. That's what we found out to date. Of all the schools we're working on and all the modeling we've done, water to air heat pumps provides the lowest EUI, but doesn't always equate to most efficient building usage. So, cons, there are only 2 manufacturers that do VAV heat pumps on the market right now, and that's what we want to use for efficiency, but only 2 manufacturers want to do. First cost, again, the geothermal wells, the decarbonization one, that's what you need if you go water to air. Higher maintenance, more unitary equipment. A school like this, you'd probably need 28, 30 of these heat pumps around. That's 30 little compressors you got to maintain and deal with on a yearly basis. More interior space, more closets throughout the building, take up more space, valuable floor space that could be used for other classroom programs. And again, the generator size for decarbonization. That's just another con for it. But in closing, I'm really recommending we go for the chill beam approach. The determination of whether or not we go geothermal versus fossil fuel based is going to come out when ONG completes their estimates and how the school budget is. Okay. Either way, whether we go fossil fuels or geothermal, we can make the chill beam option work, get the best efficiency we can within the system. Tecton can design the building to meet your program, but it's really the driver is going to be your cost. And if we're still a pretty good EUI. If you look at Chill Beam, it's 21 to 25, very good low EUI versus the ground source heat pump, 70 to 25. So we're still in a good range. But it's really going to come down to how our schematic estimates come down, and we can make an informed decision. But we're recommending, no matter what we do, we use Chill Beam as our basic design and use the air handlers or heat pumps for the gym and cafeteria. What we're using for heat rejection source, whether it be geothermal versus fossil fuels, all going to come down to dollars and cents. And if you guys have a bigger push and you can figure out a way we can shuffle money around and go with, we do it. But that'll be an informed decision once we have estimates at schematic. Right, Jeff? Yeah.
Is there much cost for the radiant floor systems?
Is there much cost?
I mean, it's
Oh yeah, there's a cost you're paying per square foot.
You're running pipes through the floor.
You're running a PEX tubing through the floor on a 6 or 9 inch center, and each one will have their own individual header. And yeah, there's a cost to it. Is it needed? It's not needed to provide heat. It's to provide comfort. It's just to give a floor warming. So when you get the children playing on there, it gives a warm floor. Some schools, if they have the budget, they keep it. Some, it's one of the first things that goes.
Do the specs call for it for kindergarten or just for pre-K?
Both. I saw both.
Both.
Right?
Thanks, so.
Yes.
So just for reference, that's an item that on another project, we're doing as a bid alternate. That particular project has 5 kindergarten classrooms and 4 pre-kindergarten classrooms. And the budget alternate at this point in the project is $350,000. So that's kind of your rough order of magnitude.
Maybe a little bit more than that.
Yes.
Because we're a bit larger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I understand the rationale for the pre-K. I'm not certain that we absolutely have to have it for the kindergarten, but see price wise.
Just get a price.
I'm sure our kindergarten teachers would disagree. But
I don't know. I've worked in a lot of buildings with carpeted floors, and they are not cold. Little kids get down on the floors without an issue.
Well, and you do it at home, you do it everywhere. To them, they don't really know, but it is a nicety. And again, the budget.
It's a dollar and cent thing. We're willing to do anything
Exactly
if we can afford it.
That's exactly right. That's it. But our push is really to focus on the Chill Beam because it gives you the individual controls throughout the school, except for your large areas where you wouldn't be appropriate. It couples with either system. The system will be driven by budget. Radiant floor will be, looked at from a cost perspective. The dedicated outsider system works for everything, which will give you the best IAQ for the building because we'll always have fresh air exchange throughout. Control system, we always know it's going to be integrated with the 2 systems we talked about, ALC or Distech, whatever it may be. And we're looking to shoot around that EUI of 25 or so. And if we can keep it below 25, the more incentive you'll get from Eversource.
Yeah. Well, the Chill Beam system sounds very good to me. I love the pictures that you showed in last time. To me, the only real issue is, we bring in that gas line at whatever, $1 million versus doing geo wells, which you're estimating like $2.5 million.
$3 million.
Well, it could be. You have $1 million for the gas line possibly. You have $1 million for geo in the budget. That's $2 million. Our budgets right now are 2.8 or so for this. That's the maximum geothermal. I think those wells field will come down. If for every well we take out, you're taking out $27,000, so it adds up pretty quick.
The geo wells would be reimbursable, right?
Yeah.
'Cause that's what
Plus,
that's
the other thing I think about, budget had a line item on it of $1 million. That doesn't mean that's just for the well field. That's to help get you a well field because you already have a mechanical budget of something. Because if you don't put wells in, you're putting a chiller in, you're putting a boiler in. That has a value. That could be another $500,000. So that $500,000 rolls into the well field, right? So that there's offsets in there that really we're not incorporating right now. So that's where.
So we need to price it out.
It's all going to come out in the estimates. Yes, it really is.
And I would just like to add, of course, I'm not immune that we have to do the budget and we will have to make hard decisions about that. But when we're talking about building a new school and we have these missions of the future of the Cheshire community, the future of our children, we know that gas heat has issues, right? Fracking has issues. There are environmental concerns to it. And if we're going to be thinking about the future and about what's best for the future of Cheshire and of these students, I think we need to really see and really weigh those concerns against going to geothermal, which right now is our most forward-thinking way to get heating and cooling.
Greg, have you done any geo with water-to-water heat pumps with central systems?
Oh, yeah.
So we wouldn't need 30 closets around the building.
No.
We could do it.
There's a net zero building just came online at Southern. That's geothermal with water to water to traditional VAV air. Yeah.
So we could do the chill beams.
Well, that's how we use water to water to create the water to run to the chill beams, correct? Yeah. So
it's
you're
kind of-
centralized.
Kind of a hybrid alternative rather than the heat pump.
Correct. You're still using heat pumps. We use the water to water heat pumps with chill beams, and we can use air to water heat pumps to do the gym and the camp.
You had mentioned, I'm sorry, that there are a limited number of manufacturers of chill beams. Are there differences from manufacturer to manufacturer, and are there supply chain issues? See if we can get into it.
No supply chain issues with those, because there's really nothing to them, it's just sheet metal and coils.
Okay,
Nothing in it.
right. No difference from manufacturer to manufacturer?
No, they all have their little differences, that it's how they build them, their nozzles. The way a chill beam works, it works on induction principle. So you run air to it, it creates a high velocity venturi, and it induces room air. And that's where you get a dilution rate and your cooling. But different manufacturers use different nozzle configurations to do the same thing. It's all the same principle, but they all have their own little unique, otherwise it's, each one's patented or to do each way, but they all work the same. And there's enough manufacturers that can meet the intent of what we need to do here and get a competitive bid. That's not an issue. And you said you went and toured Brookfield, that was chill beam, right?
Yeah.
We went to that school in Oxford, that was chill beam. You got to see what it looks like. It's actually an attractive system in the building.
Yeah.
So. But that's our base bid. We have alternates in there that'll be priced, but I really think the approach that we like to present is whichever we use for heating or cooling, decarbonization of fossil fuels, that whatever chill beam would be the way we want to pursue inside the building.
What do you need from the committee?
I don't think we need a formal vote. We're not, so we can tell you what's in the basis of design, which is what Craig just referenced, which is there's a basis of design narrative that describes a chill beam system. There are alternates that are described, well, there are options that are described utilizing a geothermal well field or a carbon-based or gas. So all of that is going to be presented to you as in an estimate format about which system costs which. And, it's high level at this point, but at least from the narrative, we have the information that we can get to the estimators for them to be able to provide you with some, the value proposition of, if we're lucky, I don't want to make it sound like it's a crapshoot, but, if our estimate looks to be good, reasonable, sound within our budget, it may give you it may give you some flexibility to make those decisions. If it's a challenge or if there's work to do on the estimate, that's where you start to weigh that option versus perhaps some other options, value management options.
And we would have those numbers by August 10th when
Yes.
we're supposed to
Yes.
vote on this committee.
Greg, I have a question for you. A lot of times when I see projects, there's constraints, and you pick what you think is the best approach for that based on the constraints, but in the back of your mind, you're like, boy, if it wasn't for that, this project really lends itself to this. Is chill beam because of any constraints, or chill beam, do you really think is a really good approach and the right approach for what we're doing?
I think it's a good approach. I don't think there's any constraints in this building. We can make, I think, any system work as long as we have, the cab, but you have to sacrifice some things too. Maybe your ceilings and the quarters be 6 inches lower. If if you went, or whatever, see, they don't, architects want to do it. That's what would happen.
You understand my question?
Building
You've seen
crossing
crossing
sections
sections.
tall.
I just want to make sure that this is, but I just want to make sure, that you really do feel that for this, that's the right approach.
I
It's
think
not a
that-
right approach based on a bunch of compromises and some other things.
No, we're not compromising anything. I think what we're doing is we're putting together a system that'll, for one, that'll outlive us all here. It'll be a very efficient system, good.
I don't know if that says a lot.
No,
offense,
it's good.
Just hoping to
It's
get
good.
done before we all die.
You may change a compressorized piece of equipment in 15 or 20 years, but the chill beam can keep going. A chill beam is basically a diffuser with a coil in it, right? It's all it is. So no moving parts. So every once a year, every 2 years, you might vacuum them. You know, you're doing it during the summer as part of when you're waxing the floors, right?
We're not waxing the floors. We're not waxing the floors.
Wow.
So we can take that.
Whatever that may be, right?
That-
But you're still coming in, maybe touch up paint, whatever, you gotta do your thing. But that's it. So I'm not pushing it on you guys or anything. I've seen a lot of schools with it. We've done schools with it. I think it's a great approach. And it's still within the efficiency range we want to be in to get the best bang for the buck from the utility company. And I think it suits the Chester school system. Other than I'd like to recommend that, saying this is what I think could be your best, based on what we have, based on square footage, trying to cut costs. I think this would be the way to go.
Now, we get some rebate money that'll come back from Eversource.
Correct.
And I know that you can kind of structure that in two different ways. You can either get that as a lump sum that comes to us or something that's spread out post-construction. Is that-
Typically,
I don't know if I understood when I was talking to someone about
Yeah,
it.
there's two pros. There's incentives that are done early. When you have your schematic kickoff meeting, you have your design incentive. Those are paid out before construction is complete. And that's small. That's paid out typically to the design team for doing what we're doing with that. Then the town gets their money after construction is done, and Eversource comes in and certifies by post inspection that what you said you were going to do is what was done, and they cut you the check.
So that money is not part of the construction budget then? That's something that just go back to the town?
That's
after the
what
project's done.
OSCGNR wants to. I mean, OSCGNR sometimes they take that away from reimbursement. But I think they stopped doing it.
They don't do that anymore.
There you go. Then it comes
And it's
directly to you.
It's not.
Yeah.
UGA.
So,
Office of Grants Administration.
but that comes back into the town as a check. So what happens? We got to have a meeting within the next 4 weeks before August 10th. We got to have this meeting, and we're going to just sit down. They're going to explain the program. We're going to explain what we're proposing to do with both schools. They'll write an MOU together, which is a contract. And we may put a goal. We're going to try to do EUI 25. We're going to go path 2, not path 1. Just a reason, if we don't be less than 25 EUI, path 1 you don't get. It puts you to path 2. But path 1 requires more capital outlay by the town, which means you have to cost share with Eversource for a independent reviewer that does it, and you'd have to pay up to $10,000 of that value, whatever that guy charges Eversource. But we don't need to go path 1 because we're going to be right around that bubble. So we go path 2, no extra outlay by the town. We sign the MOU, gets signed by the town. That just gets the ball rolling. You're now in the queue. And then all we do from there is we do our design model to them. And at the end of the CD, we submit our model. That's what their basis is on. And incentive is made up there, and that's what they're going to pay you at the end of construction. That's how it works.
We've got 2 projects going through that review process now. It is pretty painless. And as Craig was describing it, there is, that check at the end. There was talk with the state about making it eligible to go back into the project. We're waiting to see what that wording looks like. There was a statute that was passed this year that says any federal money can be used towards the owner's share. Any other state money can't. And what we were waiting to see was something that said beyond the word federal, that something like a utility rebate would be considered. Conversations with the state and with the reviewers has been, no, the governor is in favor of this. We want to make it work for you and not have it come off the top like it used to. So there's a mechanism in the works. We just haven't heard what the final wording is going to be. But presumably that check for $300,000 or whatever it might turn out to be would be able to come back into the project budget.
And help to defray the cost of.
To defray the owner's portion of the total
The
project.
whole purpose of this is, so say geothermal, you had 200 or 300,000 shortfall. This could help you offset your freight that cost. To do that, say, okay, we know we're gonna get something in this range. That's great, we can use that to help, or it could be some other efficient thing, but it's something to do with the efficiency of the building. And geothermal will give you a more efficient building, which gives you a higher incentive.
Eversource has, in addition to the baseline incentives for efficiency based on energy use index, they're also selling heat pumps. So if you end up with a heat pump based heating and cooling plant, there is an additional layer of incentive that gets paid on top of that.
It's like $1,000 a ton, something like that. It's a pretty high number because they're really pushing the decarbonization. They want to give you money. It's our money that we paid into the fund, but they want to distribute that money to people, to towns and everything who can use it. So the incentive could be a lot more than what I posted.
Do they get to keep the whole incentive, or they gotta share with the state?
No, they're moving in the direction to where the town can keep the whole value.
Yep.
And as far as the terminal devices, yes, the chilled beams are probably the most predominant. Chilled beams, direct outside air, and then using the alternative for the big box spaces. That's pretty much what we're seeing in the vast majority of all of our school projects.
So this gives us more square footage for instructional spaces because we're not using big boilers, rooms, and all that sort of thing.
Just one room to put the water heat pumps in, but you're not gonna have. You could go rooftop. We want to keep the roof clean in case you do go PV. So we're keeping that clean. So equipment have to come inside and get more square footage. And that's just the whole really driving force of where school design is going.
So,
Comments?
Mr. Chair, I think you started this recent discussion about whether or not we needed a formal motion or a formal approval to go in this direction. We're telling you what direction the basis of design is, our recommendation is going in. I think what we'd like to hear is if there are any issues with that, and if that needs to come in the form of a motion, so be it, or just simply the consensus of the committee.
Whatever the committee would like to do. I have no concern. I think, what you presented sounds sound, and I'd like to see the numbers on August 10th and see what we can do. But others, if you want to take a vote, that's fine, or you just want to express your feelings on it.
I don't know that we need a formal vote, just to see if anybody has any concerns. The only thing I would like to do is just see if our chief operating officer has any concerns, since he's gonna own it.
No,
We did.
your chief operating officer does not have a lot of knowledge about this directly, but we did talk about it with the facilities director, Rich Clavette, for the schools, who, is very much in favor of it. In fact, it was mentioned in our ed spec that, we'd certainly like chill beam to be a consideration. So, yeah, we're certainly happy with this as a basis of design from my perspective.
And Jeff, it's gonna be your school, you're cool with it?
It sounds like a great solution. I like the flexibility though, of being able to add the photovoltaic somewhere down the road. As Sarah mentioned, things continue to evolve. As prices drop on those, to just be able to drop them in at some point would be really nice to have.
Structurally, we'll put on that 8 pounds a square foot for ballasted systems, make sure the building can hold it. And after that, it'd be a function of the site class, the site design class, it's B or C. If it's B, it's a ballasted. If it's a C, it's gonna be a combination of ballasted and geared in the future. But that means they actually fasten portions of the structure too, so they don't blow out. Because you can't, otherwise you gotta put a lot more weight. And then typically you wouldn't design the structure to support all that additional ballast. It's too expensive. So that should be something that just put in the criteria. And then you do whatever you want in the future.
But we wouldn't want to cross PV off the list now. I mean, if we could do some PV within the budget,
Well, I think that's the
something
point.
we wanna
That's
do.
something that can be added anytime. if we're setting it up already. If we get down the line and we find we have excess funds, we could add it in at any time, and you don't have to do the whole thing, you could do some.
Yeah. I thought we were talking about after the school is built and commissioned, then we're gonna come up with some money.
Well, we're saying that's
I'd rather make sure that we get it in
that's a
now.
possibility. We'll see. You'll have the
I think
ability.
it's more
to-
like do what we can now.
Saying like 5 years from now.
Do what we can now and add after the fact if necessary.
Well, do you want to put something in now, and then that could be something that we can't afford it, that's something that goes, except for the provisions of it? Except for, you know, the conduits and the up into the switchgear and, you know, the roof structure?
My recommendation at this point is honestly is to see kind of where we're at. And I still, yeah, if you can get some piece out of education, would be great to do. But it's tough to just, what's that number going to be? If you put 100 kW up there just for educational purpose, it can. But I think you really have to understand, because the original estimate had the PPA was the land for PV. My recommendation is we see where the building is, and to put it in the design and DD, in my mind, is simpler to do, as long as the building has the structure to support it. And then I think it'd be simpler to add if there's money available.
Other
Once
comments?
you get your schematic estimate and you look at the price of the different options, the alternates that are in there, if you've got an inkling that you want to go with heat pumps and geothermal wells, those are going to be much more difficult to do down the road. You're not going to tow up the site and put in wells down the road, where you very well might add PV to the roof down the road.
Good PVs, you can put a parking, a shaded structure into over your thing. Very easy to be done. There's options that really will affect.
We did that at the police station every time.
So this approach would be no natural gas feed to the school, that natural gas line would be off the table?
No, what they're saying is they're gonna go forward with the chilled beams into
Right.
the building. How it's actually gonna get delivered, whether it's fossil fuel or decarbonization, they're gonna price up both of those in the schematic design part. That's what we're gonna get in August. So all we're doing right now is tell them, yeah, go forward with the chilled beam so that they can continue to
Okay, go
design
on
the
your
building.
system.
Yeah. And then you're gonna see come August, can we afford the
Right,
geothermal?
thermal, or do we go with the
Or do
carbon?
we bring in the gas line?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're all set. All right, turn it back to you.
Okay, now let's talk site plan and building plan. So this is really the fun part of the thing. Sorry, Craig, I can't help it.
Good shot. Now that that's over with.
Okay, here is the site plan. We have Marion to the top of the screen, Jarvis now you guys can't see my cursor here. So this may start to get a little difficult. So we have the building footprint that you can see in the middle. We have parking, 3 distinct parking areas. The parking area that's to the left supports the berth to 3 wing. When we get into the floor plans, you'll see the appendage to the building footprint to the left is where we have our berth to 3 program. We have the parent pickup and drop off and parking location, visitor parking in the middle parking lot, the bus pickup and drop off in the right hand parking lot. And one of the things that we have heard with, as we had mentioned in previous meetings, related to our council presentation is the concept of making sure that we're trying to get some green or recreation space, field space within our building design. So what you see here are two separate fields. These can, as we move forward, we can have a discussion about how formal these fields are. If they're simply a green field that can then be used flexibly for either a ball field or a soccer field, or if it's an actual formal formal field with a fence around it, et cetera. To the bottom of this site plan, and perhaps maybe at this point I can get into I'm going to stand up while we're doing this. So here's the floor plan that's superimposed onto the illustrated site plan that we show. We see the birth to 3 parent and bus loop that's here. The area that's in the green is our birth to 3, our 3 wings. So we have our administrative suite, our Smart Start, our intensive education spaces. We have kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2 as kind of our classroom propers. Our administrative suite is located off of our parent pickup and drop off loop. We have this would be the main entry that's located here. We do have a secondary entry that can help support some of the pickup and drop off operations if there's staging for bus drop off can be done in the cafeteria. So the way that the whole pickup and drop off sequence as it relates to the site kind of supports these areas that are on the more public and administrative area of the site. What we're building in is some of the age-specific playscapes. So in this area, we have our birth to 3 age group. I think as we move along, we'll kind of fine-tune exactly how many of these playscapes we have along here. Trying to nestle in some of our stormwater management and above ground detention that ends up being a nice landscape feature. But really, this area is intended to be away from the vehicular traffic so that really this whole area ends up being private with respect to the school operations. We will have a sidewalk that, as we've mentioned previously, we will have a sidewalk that runs around the perimeter with a structured landscape feature that will allow an apparatus, a first responder apparatus, to be able to go 360 degrees around the building. Our service area is located off of our bus loop, so we have had some discussions in some of our working group meetings about what the nature is for if there are any gates that are associated with some of these parking areas. That's something that we're going to be tracking as we move into design development. We have incorporated some hot top play areas, so we have a basketball court in this location. We have color-coded asphalt in this area near some of our younger learners. Starting to pick up some outdoor classroom locations that are overall part of the design. Patio off of our cafeteria as well.
Justin, how large is the cafeteria? I know that was a question up front.
Do you remember?
It's larger than the ed spec.
Yes,
right.
It's
The ed spec,
media
yeah,
center,
very
so-
small.
It's about, I believe, around 3,800 square feet. I think you had 2,950 actually.
Yeah,
I'll
so
tell
it's
you
about
right now.
1,000 square foot more.
Yeah, and in that, the area that isn't shaded purple, which is the white, isn't necessarily, so that's still part of the space. So remember, we spoke of that last time. You'll see it in the floor
So
plan.
you can open that area
Yeah, so that's an
up into
open,
the
no
hallway.
wall there.
Yeah, there's really no wall there. That's an open cafeteria, and it's kind of.
So that's really part of the cap.
Yeah, we're cheating a little bit to get more space in the cap, and that
So when you say 38, that doesn't count that hallway?
I don't think so. Is it on the floor plan? Did you see it?
Yeah, it's 2,900 square feet. And in that blue area is what's indicated on the floor plan, but yeah, it is different.
Yeah, that's it. So it's about, I think, including that, right?
So it's 29, which
Plus-
is still, and plus that hallway.
That hallway. And the tables are
24 8-person tables.
right, which equals a third of your total population. So you're not gonna have 7 different lunchways. It's based on 3.
Why not just take that hallway out altogether and make it part of the cap?
It is open. It's
It,
just
it,
shaded.
it is open, it's just the way that it's shading is showing. It's,
So you've got some doors
half
there that
windows.
open into the cap essentially.
No, actually, that is open to that end of the building. So it's open to the corridor.
The
Yeah, it's
entire
open to the
cafeteria.
corridor on the bottom, but at the top, if somebody was coming in at night
Oh,
for a
yeah,
show or
there's- yeah,
program,
yeah.
they're coming in through those doors into the cafeteria.
Yes, yep,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah, there's larger plans, but
Yes.
I guess you want to read this.
Yeah, so one of the things to mention is in some of our preliminary layouts, we discussed enclosed corridors. And I didn't specifically mean to look at you when I said that. This particular layout allows for the same things that we appreciate about courtyards, in the sense that we have perimeter wall that allows us to get natural light in, but we have stopped the building proper at these locations to allow maintenance crews and access from here. So one of the nice things about this is that it ends up framing a nice little amphitheater that's in there that is directly adjacent to our music spaces and our visual art spaces. So you can really, now, caution you, the plans don't currently show any direct connection on the back wall, but wow, talk about an opportunity to, yes, exactly, to have this type of activity happening in the floor plan and this type of site amenity out behind it.
Hey, Justin, can you speak to the relationship of the gym to the gardens and the field above? Because that shows up in Ernest's rendering, that the entry garden just to the north of the
Between
of
the
gym.
parking lots.
So that area where it becomes this grand lawn.
Yeah,
might have to go
so-
back one.
So
You want
I
me to
think
go
we
back?
can go back.
Here we go,
As you just saw on the floor plan detail, the volume of our gymnasium is right here. So the way that this works proportionally with where we placed our parking areas. Now, we are building in some structured landscaping in here, so in the event that there needs to be emergency crossing of these, we'll be able to do it, or perhaps for a night and evening event. But really, this stretch of green space is proportional to the gymnasium, so you can really picture an event occurring in the gymnasium spilling out into this green area that directly abuts it. And the entry garden, and what am I missing about that?
No, you'll see it in the rendering that Ernest will explain later. That lawn area, that symmetry is important because that it provides a little bit more flexibility for events in the gymnasium if you want to open up that end of the gymnasium. And you'll see that in a few of the perspective views.
What's going on with the site there, like where it's coming down and then it just, you got the retaining wall on the like levels, I guess, on the right side there. How's that actually look into there? Like the slope?
So it's kind of sloping down from Marion Road, and then we're kind of tearing it down with a couple retaining walls to give a little bit more of a, level field for that parking area. Because with the amount of grade drop that we have to do from Marion Road to bring it down, we don't want to have that parking lot over 5% to not create a situation where your car doors kind of slam on themselves and unsafe conditions for the buses and drop-off areas. So we really had to kind of get some relief off those retaining walls in order to get that grade down to a more acceptable.
What I'm saying though is you got that on the right side, so like how's it different on the left? Or
There's a
right
lot-
down the middle there, it's still the same.
The middle
slope,
isn't
no?
as bad because we don't have to get that 5% across that entire plane. So we can actually make up a little bit more grade in that kind of area right above it. It kind of starts to taper off and flatten out as we kind of move towards the parent drop-off bus over in the center.
So it's a little steeper on the right side.
Yeah.
And in an ideal world, and they're still working on it, those retaining walls will eventually, over time, as many emails as I send, they'll go away. We'll figure out the grading to work
Right.
so that we have a slope, but what we want to be careful of with this grade level is to have some retaining walls. I always get a little nervous with that. So, we'll fine tune that a little bit better.
And the slope as it kind of keeps going, I guess, into the school though. The school's like all on One level.
It's
It's
on
not
one
like you
level.
have like a walkout or something.
Yeah, no, it's all one level.
So the school will be on one level and kind of pitch away, and then they'll be kind of like, so the center, if you can see in the two center parking lots, the center one and the right one, the green space that's in between where the drop offs are. So those would be used as bioretention areas. So we're kind of pitching towards that in both directions from the parking lot and from the school. And then using that to kind of filtrate the water before we bring it back to the detention pond areas.
Gotcha.
Is there any reason the bus loop is on the steepest driveway?
They reversed it. It was the other way.
It was the other way. And it was more for us to get more, a little bit greater sight distances on that right driveway than the center one. So
That's
we have
gonna be a long,
It's a long one, and we've graded it out to be under 9%. So that's why it's coming all the way down to the bottom of the driveway.
have you seen the buses we have? Okay.
Yeah, there was a meeting with the bus company
Correct.
personnel, and they talked about that back and forth in terms of which one. The one thing I like about it is if you do have like a field up at the left-hand side there, you've got parent coming in on the weekends and doing program. You've got your parent parking in that area, so I think that piece works well. The buses would have to come down and go all the way around so that they're lining up with their doors facing the school. I don't know if you figured out how many buses can line up there. I know that was
So we have approximately 3 dropping off, and then they kind of stack all the way around as we kind of go. And the good part about that is even though the buses are kind of stacked around the loop, there's still access points for them to get into the center islands for parking at that point. So you kind of have a dual kind of use right there.
and the expectations that staff would
park in the center.
park in that bus area.
Yeah, I mean, that point received and we understand, and we need to fine tune it and look at kind of pushing and pulling this around so that we can kind of.
Give a little zigzag.
Yeah, just, I think there's some ways that we can mitigate some of those elevation changes, maybe pull the building up a little bit or something. But yeah, we understand your point.
We talked about this, so as Rich said, the concern for our transportation manager is not the grade on the driveway up and down. It's just as long as you have a flat area for drop off.
And I will say,
That's the more important
at the
feature.
drive entrance off of Marion, we do have a pretty level spot for the buses to stop at. So they're not at a steep grade trying to get back up onto Marion and causing more delays getting onto Marion Road. So we did account for that.
No
See,
one
it's
does
angular
limit
at
on
the
that
top there.
road.
Can you talk a little bit about the detention, I mean, it looks like a beautiful Caribbean water pond right now, but, what is it otherwise, when it's dry, is it just filled with riprap or? what is it?
No, it would actually be filled with plantings. And so
Natural grasses kind of?
natural grasses and kind of more wetland type plants that we could kind of control. The point would be that would be used as kind of a teaching area. That's why we have the bridges going from the playground areas to kind of allow for the classrooms to come outside, talk about the natural landscaping and how stormwater is kind of managed throughout the area, because you'll also be able to overlook the wetland areas that's further south.
But is that expected to be dry except for like this past week?
It will be dry within a 24-hour storm event. We never do any storm water that's retained at the base because of the fact that it creates a mosquito habitat and then it causes bigger concerns for the students. And so it will dry out.
So you can go out and look at it right after a storm and see what's going on, and teach, and then.
Correct. Yep.
This is where the turtle at.
Where does all your stormwater go from the parking lots?
So the stormwater from the parking lots would enter, as I kind of mentioned before, into the bioretention areas, which are the larger green space areas. And then they would then be piped down to the back.
You want to go up and show me.
So the whole point of the stormwater design is to not really utilize the traditional underground detention systems as much as possible, try to keep it more natural. So we're gonna be planning on doing water quality swales along the driveways. All the stormwater would come down to these bioretention areas, and we're also looking at possibly putting in a smaller one in this area as well. Those would then be piped around and then down to the larger basin at the base of the site plan. And then that would ultimately drain to the wetlands, which is the natural detention pond of the area. So our conversations with the city engineer is gonna kind of come down to how they treat this wetlands. And if they consider it to be the natural stormwater detention area of the area, then we can really utilize this more for a water quality rather than actually storing and holding on to the stormwater. So we'll be able to discharge a little quicker, keep it drained out much faster. So we have to have that dialogue as we kind of move forward with the design. But the whole point of the stormwater design is to have everything kind of filtrate through and then ultimately end up down here and then ultimately into the west.
So sand and stuff from, the parking lots, how would that be filtered out?
So the sand, anything that came through it would come through the bioretention areas, the rain gardens. All that would be filtered out through the medium. It's about a 3 foot medium of natural soil down to sand and then down through a little bit gravel medium. And then an under drain would pick those up and then carry that water that's clean at that point down to the actual, recharge areas that we're proposing. So we're trying to use natural mediums rather than trying to do a proprietary stormwater treatment that has a vortex unit or anything like that, which causes you guys a little bit more maintenance on a more annual basis. If you have traditional catch basins, you're gonna have to clean those out. The less we use those and the more we use a rain garden system, it's a little bit easier for you guys to maintain. You're kind of just going in there and just kind of cleaning out, just the sand and debris that may come out through.
So if you get a lot of snow and stuff in this upper area, and it, you get a warm day, it's gonna melt, it's gonna come into that parking lot and then freeze up at night, because that's all coming down to that area, right? There's no storm drains up at the top part.
Oh, we could still put in the storm drains.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
we could bring them through these mediums here.
All right,
So
but there still may be storm drains along the top.
correct. Yeah, it
Those-
just
those
wouldn't
get
be
piped
completely traditional.
directly to the rain gardens.
Okay.
Yeah, we typically would do a kind of a.
All right,
belt
I thought everything was coming down to that. area.
It will, but at the same
On-
time,
on
we'll
the
be using
surface.
catch basins as well, and kind of a function of both.
Okay.
We're trying to utilize the natural medium in order to filtrate it, but we will collect it just as a fail-safe for those type of events. So, but you won't have your underground detention systems that, drive up costs for everybody and, they're just on site, at least, you don't see them, they have maintenance on them, so.
Are there any plans for any irrigation systems? Not yet discussed.
Not yet discussed at this point. Usually we put it in there and then it kind of gets budgeted and you guys will have, whether or not you have the funds to put it in there, but we typically
Ben, do
put
we
in
have
there.
irrigation anywhere else?
The high school.
The high school fields?
Yeah. That doesn't mean we don't want irrigation. I mean, thanks for bringing that up. If we can get it in. And those two fields, by the way, they should be synthetic turf anyway, so.
I was thinking the same thing.
I don't
At
get
least
the
this
laughter.
one. At least this one.
Is that where the extra $1 million is going?
Even North Haven got them. Two, thank you.
You're on TV, buddy.
No, I don't hear anyone clamoring for that, but that's all right.
Is there any anticipation for any snow melt or ice melt anywhere on any of the walkways? Or motor parking range, or is that just something we would handle just with ice melt?
Dude, it's ice.
No, you're talking about inside.
Oh, no.
There's no plan for that, no.
We usually don't see those, but it's, in extreme situations where there's large slope or something where you want to make sure that you're not getting any flash freezes, but we typically do not try and design those types of ramps in the sidewalk.
Just wonder if we got it right.
I have to say, I'm really excited about this.
My thought on this is great.
I've seen it developing over the last, couple of months. I look at it and I say, boy, this like could be a wonderful environment for kids. I like the layout. I like the way that the different grade levels are structured. I like the fact that you can close off the building and use it at night for the gym, for the CAF, for different programs without anyone getting to the rest of the building. The parking is very easy, separates out the parent and student drop off from all the buses. I think there's a lot of real positive things. And I'm excited by what could happen in these little islands almost looks like a Disney map. As I'm looking at it, we'll see what happens in reality.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, go
point
ahead.
of clarification, pre-K, where it's got that play area identified, that's
That's exterior to the
Yeah.
building. Yep.
and that's just grass?
We have I believe
I
we
see
have it
the
as a hot
asphalt
top
piece,
area. Yeah.
the gray.
Yep.
So then am I to assume that the play area piece is grass? This is what about kids kind of tracking through that?
No, that's actually, the label just couldn't fit on all the asphalt. So this is the play
Gotcha.
area, asphalt play area, it's just,
Great.
it's too
Okay.
long, too much wood.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it's a little,
It looks
kids will be trampling through the grass
No.
back into the building.
Oh, no, yeah, right.
But that, okay, just wanted to make sure, thanks.
Little kids never trample anything.
Right. Adults trample into the building.
Okay, so just as a building diagram, you have the main level on the left, the upper level on the right. The area highlighted by 1 or in the teal color is our birth to 3 areas. Our red areas are what we're calling Main Street or the front public curriculum spaces of the building. And then the areas identified in 3 are our learning communities. So for the main level floor plan, come up to the screen. So this is a little bit, so the drawings that you have in your 11 by 17s and what's on here are slightly different. They're a little bit more technical. But the orientation and the sizes and everything are exactly the same. You'll see the ones there have populated furniture and stuff like that. So again, our main birth to 3 entry, we have our admin suite, our Smart Start, our Parent and Child Resource Center, our intensive education, and our EIC, Early Intervention Center classrooms are 4 here. So again, the areas in the green represent our birth to 3. We do have our kindergarten classrooms down the hallway in this area. Our main entry for our administrative spaces are in the kind of light brown here, or warm gray, I guess. So main office, our principal, our administrative assistant, our conference room, some of our faculty toilets, as well as our nurse suite. Right across the hallway from our main entrance, we have our media center. We also have what's called a communicating stair that is not behind a means of egress or a protected, fire protected area. In other words, it's not required to be fire protected for egress. So it grants us some flexibility to allow this to be open. And some of the existing buildings that you toured with us, those of you who did, each one of the examples showed this type of it's really an active stair, becomes an engaging part of the connection between the main level and the upper level. We have our gymnasium that is faced with our stage or platform that is double facing between either the gym for a larger assembly or maybe an all-school assembly, or the cafeteria in the event that the gym is used, or maybe there's a more specific presentation that's going on at the cafeteria.
Is that stage something that can be used as an instructional space? I mean, what kind of temporary wall is that going to have?
So these, we will have folding partitions, and I think what may actually be good is if we go also in the interest of time and not, You know what, why don't we talk about the area specifically, because we have some blow up, we have some large floor plans. So what I will do, the main thing that we wanted to stress with this particular floor plan is if you focus on where the main entry for the birth to 3 area, or the area in green, is to the right of the floor plan, we did want to show you an option where we kink that appendage within the building footprint In order to align more centrally between the two parking spaces, the two parking lots that we have for the birth to 3 pickup and drop off, and also the parent pickup and drop off. So there may be a way that we will be able to create some pedestrian circulation that connects this entrance to both parking areas. So
Yeah,
Do
one-
we lose square footage because now you get that huge open area
No.
there?
no, what
I don't know the exact, square footage is one option versus the other. I think they're similar. This was kind of a shot at the response to some of the comments we heard at our working session on Tuesday. So the other piece that this does, besides responding to the site, as Justin had mentioned, it gives you direct visual connections between the two main entries. That was a comment that we heard. So if the principal's in their office, birth to 3, they have a visual connection to the main entry office across the way. So it's not perfect yet, but I think it's responsive to the comments that we heard on Tuesday.
okay.
Looks like you waste more space, to be
It
honest.
does look that
You
way.
have
Yeah.
like this giant dead end
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Well, all that open
You know,
space
big
there
open
is a
spaces,
concern.
we're losing
It's
somewhere
Yeah,
that square
that's-
footage is being used.
If that open space was with older kids, that, I think that
Yeah,
would be
it'd be
better for
nice.
pull-out area and stuff, but for pre-K, you're not really gonna do that.
Well, I think the point of this is to discuss possibly the opportunities for both a site circulation and also an administrative visibility.
Right.
So if we can solve the perceived space problem here in a more effective way, we think that this is a potential for this particular area.
It just may want to finish turning, basically. Turn
Right.
the rest of the degree.
I like this one better. I don't think that's lost space. I think we could use that as like gathering and,
Yeah, but
I know.
remember, you only have a certain amount of square footage.
yeah,
So if you're adding square footage there because you've turned the building, they're gonna end up having to take it from someplace else.
What's the administrative piece of this again? See that?
The
The visibility part?
So if the secretary and principal office, the two offices in the green, presumably will have windows that can then look to the right towards the other main entry. So there's visual connections. They have eyes on both parking lots, basically. Because there was a comment as to, should there be more of a visual connection so that if somebody pulls into one parking lot versus the other, they
I
have.
think the issue was more, and I mean, Jeff, you could talk to
The
me,
main principal
who
doesn't.
raised it. It was more a matter of once school starts and people are coming in, do they come to the main entrance or do they come to the preschool entrance? And do you have staff in both places to man those two different doors? And I
It
think,
was more of a staffing efficiency question.
but this doesn't
addresses
affect
the
the
security
staffing at all.
It doesn't.
Either way,
no.
you still need two
Right.
people staffing the two entrances. So
We
that
have them
really
there
was,
anyway. You have people for
That
that
So-
part of the school, and you have somebody for the main part of the school anyway, right?
so
Yeah, and we're just talking about, is there a way to build efficiency for coverage in, where you don't need independent parties at both places? I don't know that that's necessarily feasible,
yeah,
but it was a
particularly,
consideration.
particularly the way the preschool has operated, with lots of people in and out all the time, and this essentially being set up almost as a school within a school.
Right.
It's
It's more autonomous.
It really is. So
I understand it.
I don't
but-
know whether it's feasible to try to bring everyone in through the main entrance, which is what, was being discussed the other day.
Yeah, it's a possibility. It's a brainstorming phase.
Yeah. I'm not
Sometimes
adverse to
more
putting it on an
storm than
angle.
rain, but
I mean, I like the angles, but I don't want to lose square footage for the rest of the building in order to do that.
Okay, so this was just an option that we wanted to show you. Just a reminder, what we know is precedent for the birth to 3. The obviously very progressive or inventive way of teaching and organizing the classroom space, filled with flexibility and the ability to reconfigure and utilize some of the building and the lighting in ways to teach the students. So now I want to caution that for the purposes of schematic design and establishing our basis of design estimates, we're populating these classrooms with furniture and what we assume are suitable classroom millwork, fixtures, etc. We're going to go through a whole room by room discussion with the working group to validate some of these things, but the thing that we wanted to discuss here, the Smart Start classrooms, we're building in some of this internal skeletal system, the columns and the overhead beams, to try and draw some of that flexibility that's currently at Darcy to the Smart Start room, as well as our early intervention center classrooms. So each one of these classrooms, both the Smart Start and the EIC classrooms, have cubbies. As soon as you come in the door, we have a dedicated toilet. We are building a little bit of millwork in the alcove outside the toilet, understanding that there's likely going to be, specific, there's going to be diaper changes, there's going to be stuff like that occurring closer to the toilet. So kind of an alcove that can occur. We do have a standard 12-foot section of millwork that accommodates some of the teacher wardrobe storage, as well as base cabinet, wall cabinet, sinks that are within the classroom. And as you see in the dashed lines and the circles the small circles that are within the classroom, we're kind of building in a module of this column and internal beam system to help support some of that task lighting and flexibility within the spaces. The white circle that's kind of in the upper middle portion, we know that there's a water feature desire for some of these classrooms. So trying to locate that close to where we have plumbing in the room, as well as within the flexible area of the classroom seems appropriate. We also have our kind of learning at the bottom of the classroom. We have kind of our traditional interactive teaching wall with a teaching station area for students to sit and gather around, as well as some of the furniture for sitting in there. Okay, feel free. We have a number of these slides, so I'm going to kind of keep going until you guys have questions or want me to stop or slow down. For our media center, as we had mentioned, directly across from the administrative suite, we have our stacks area. We're starting to put in some furniture. We need to get a circulation area in here, but one of the things that we're building in here is the concept of a learning stair that can connect the main level to the upper level and start to create the backdrop for some instructional space or occasional space for the students to sit. So that kind of frames our reading nook and our resource room below it.
How flexible is that furniture? I think if you're going to run a faculty meeting or something like that, that's a likely place that you'd want to be able to pull together some stuff, and you've got all these stacks here, they're taking all the space up.
I can tell you that we're likely not seeing the totality of the furniture in this space. So some of the things that we want to make sure that we can build in, and if there's, when we get into the room by room discussions with the faculty, there's likely an instructional wall here, whether or not that's where we have our interactive display. The furniture will be able to be flexible so that we may be able to align all of the tables into, say, an arrangement like this. Maybe they're more of a bench seating, so there are rows that are all facing that area, or the ability to kind of spread them out into a more informal kind of story time
Yeah, I
area.
think you want some real flexible
Yep.
furniture, including, I know some of the schools we looked at had movable book.
Yeah.
And we've done that in the district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Cheshire High School was probably the last major library reno we did, that's all movable.
Yeah, I mean, you likely have an area, although you want to support natural light in this space, you can typically have some of your fixed stacks along the walls in places, obviously not here, because I just told you that's going to be a teaching area. But if they are in an area along the perimeter of the space, those can be taller. Typically elementary schools for this age population, you don't necessarily want 48 or 60-inch stacks being movable. You want those to be lower so you have higher visibility for
So
your
before
young
that's
kids.
finalized, you would be sitting down with the media people who'd say,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, here's the kind of furniture, here's the kind of layout that we need.
Yes. So when I mentioned a room by room discussion, we're throwing stuff on here intentionally. I'm not meaning to describe it as we're just kind of throwing it, splashing it into the floor plans.
Well, the elementary principal in me is coming out.
Yes, yeah. So the idea is that we, from this plan or this basis of design, we then have a station point to have the discussion about, okay, well, this is what we're showing. Let's talk about all of the technology you need in the space. Let's talk about the furniture that you need in the space. Your ed spec says X, Y, and Z. Is that really what you want? Or do we deviate from that a little bit? How many people are we talking? Are we talking multiple classrooms that are in here at the same time? Do we need to support different classrooms having instructional time within this space? What's the circulation and the storage need? Do you have volunteers that are coming in? So yeah, that's part of a room by room discussion that we anticipate having.
Having done that, I think media centers more than anything else just need to be really flexible.
Mhm.
You're doing a speaker coming in, you may bring a whole grade level in. Other times you may be bringing one class at a time. So I mean, there's a lot of different things that go on in the media center, and it really becomes a joining place for the school.
Are you handling accessibility on the learning stair?
So the learning stair is going to act like a stair. We're going to make sure that we have, it will not be unlike, bleacher in a gymnasium where we need to have our ADA seated areas at the bottom. But I don't know if you're referencing handrails and stuff, or are you actually discussing?
Well, it looks like you have like a large area in the middle.
Mhm.
Is that an activity area?
It is a tiered seating area. Yes.
Okay.
Our administrative suite, so we have a little bit of detail that we need to build into here. The vestibule, obviously we know that there's a man trap at the vestibule where we have a credentialed entry into the main office, and we need to build in some of the furniture for the administrative areas and the waiting areas. But our programmatic pieces, knowing that we have our principal, assistant principal, some storage and a conference area are there. A toilet directly outside of the office area, and our nurses suite below it, including office, 2 toilets, an area for 3 cots, and some storage. So Jeff, this will be something that we'll get in a little bit more detail. This is probably going to take on 3 or 4 different layouts by the time we're done with it.
One thing you may want to consider is I found it really helpful is the nurses station has direct connection to the office.
So that will be,
The
yeah.
parents come in to pick up kids, there's a lot of back and forth
Yep.
that goes on.
So that will be interesting. That will be part of the discussion. We've had some districts that don't want that connection. They want a corridor connection because they don't want to bring a sick kid through the main office. But yeah.
There's no interest.
Yeah.
It's through the bottom.
That's okay.
Okay, so gymnasium, what was that? Was that comment? Okay. Gymnasium, cafeteria, platform. As we had mentioned, we are positioning the seating area of the gym so that
You can see the stage.
you can see the stage. So what you're seeing here are a folding partition that closes this area of the platform, a folding partition that does here. So in the event that we're having an activity here, this is open, this is closed. So we will be going through and validating that our folding partitions have the necessary STC ratings or sound transmission coefficient to make sure that we're not disrupting any of the adjacent spaces.
Where's the chair storage?
So that's thinking might be. Can't remember if we had it down here or if it's
For
something that we need to build.
which space?
The
Well, if you're
cafeteria
setting
space.
up the gym or the caf for a show.
Yeah, that gym store, so the passage there that shows the ramp consumed what was a ed spec sized chair storage, so we need to flush that out.
What is the passage? Where's it
So-
going up to?
So we need to have some accessibility up to the platform. We're showing a 30-inch raised area that this ends up being the presentation space. We'll call it a stage all day long in here until it's on a drawing. It's going to be a platform. There is a very important code distinction between whether we call something a platform or a stage. So when you see platform on a drawing, think stage.
Theater.
Just don't say it. Our cafeteria, our servery that's adjacent to our mechanical area and outside loading area. So you'll see this dash line where we're showing the 2,932 square feet. Obviously, we have a great deal of space that is in this area that is, for all intents and purposes, circulation space, but it is part of the overall cafeteria size. Okay. Should mention that tomorrow we have a food service equipment meeting with our food service equipment designer and your food service folks. That is a 2 o'clock meeting.
We're not anticipating, oh, sorry, go ahead.
With the tables and stuff open to you say that's open on both edges there. How's the noise control there?
I was just gonna take a look at that too.
So that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we pay attention to.
There was doors, double set of doors in the corridor below the gym.
Yeah.
And then there's should be another set into the classroom wing. So I would recommend you kind of push them to the edges and let the cafeteria be the space. But that's how I would control the noise. Yeah, got it. Yeah. They need to be added. Yeah.
Is the expectation that this could be used for additional tables and seating?
Yeah.
And that would not impact your egress flow, or this is not considered that? Or?
We wouldn't, yeah, I mean, you could add like another row if you needed to, but what's shown there gets you what you need for 3 lunchways. If you set it up for some other event, yeah, but you still need to maintain highways.
So as we had mentioned earlier, our visual arts and 2 music on the music classrooms on the main level. These were very specific in terms of their adjacencies and their relationship to the platform. So they're directly across the street. Now, our technical floor plans, aren't as illustrative as the site plan, but you can see the concept of trying to provide and promote some visual connection between the 2 spaces. So moving forward, you'll be seeing that in these areas. Also on the main level, our typical kindergarten rooms. So you'll see our area for cubbies along the back wall, millwork, and a dedicated toilet area off to the right. One of the things that we'll probably need to validate as we get into the room by room, we will likely be selecting some different tables and chairs for the kindergarten. But this is kind of a typical classroom layout that we're showing the ability to fit our student population in there. But for all of the classrooms, and especially the ones that have the toilet rooms, a couple of things that you'll find universal in the lower grade levels, and some of these also apply to the upper elementary grade levels. Excuse me. The door is tight. A door that is located directly adjacent from our teacher station. So a teacher who is at their desk can see if anybody's at the door. Also having access control from interior in case you have any runners that want to bolt and get out. They can't sneak by. From the main entry, banking the toilet on the corridor side, and trying to couple our standard millwork and in-classroom sink close to that for some efficiency. The instructional screen will always be at the location of the classroom where we have our door. That's kind of a common typical access control in terms of faculty control. Am I putting you guys to sleep yet?
Yes, I'm excited about that.
Second grade, this is.
I heard a yes and no. So you better speed it up.
All right.
It's only 10 of 10.
The distinction when we get to our second grade, our first and second grade classrooms, again, we're still on the main level. So we're satisfying that code requirement that we're not above the level of exit discharge. The green area is a teacher planning area that is in the knuckle of each of these learning communities, directly adjacent to our in-learning community, janitor's closet, IDF closet, and toilet rooms. The faculty toilet directly within the teacher planning area. The grade level is, again, pretty classroom. We have our dedicated millwork. When we get into our room by room, whether or not that millwork wants to exist more towards the back of the classroom rather than the middle will likely be a discussion point. Again, classroom seating arrangements and cubby space. We are recommending, I believe the educational specifications call for student lockers at the from first grade up. What we are showing are cubbies for first and second grade. It's been our experience that is preferable, but that would be something that would be a point of discussion, Jeff, with how you guys do it.
So for the staff, I've been in schools that did both.
Yep.
The one nice thing about having the lockers is it got all that stuff out of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So you gained a whole another wall. And the coats, and particularly like first and second graders, wintertime, I mean, they've got the big coats and boots and all that sort of stuff that ends up all over the place. And it's nice if you have good sized lockers and get that stuff out of there.
So you'll see when we get up to the upper level, it's a stacked layout between the main level and the upper level. You'll see how we've accommodated the lockers in that area. So resource room in each one of the learning communities, it's a classroom size space. So again, there will be a teaching station, an instructional area, some dedicated millwork, dedicated furniture. Upper level. So this is where we have our grades 3, 4, 5, and 6, as well as some dedicated public curriculum. You'll see the second story, the media center. So the media center is a double height space. The gymnasium is a double height space. The cafeteria is a double height space. We do have a visual arts classroom that is on this level, as well as some intervention and resource areas that are off of Main Street. Our third grade looks very similar to the second grade classroom below, so teacher planning module as well as a grade level module. Our special education intervention and OTPT suite, so math intervention, reading intervention, the necessary office spaces that are a part of its storage, as well as OTPT and social worker and psychologist in their own, still within kind of a public area of the building, but within their necessary adjacencies that have been identified in the educational specifications.
Question I had is, and that's above the music room?
Yes.
And across, adjacent from the open gym.
We're
So
not
anything
concerned
we
about
could
sound
do to
transmission?
fortify the sound there?
So I can tell, sorry, I missed your question.
And adjacent from the open gym.
So there will be a wall separating the gym. There will be a wall on the other side of that corridor. But you're
Like a half wall?
it'll be a full height wall with glazing,
Glass. Oh,
looking into it.
Alright.
So Dennis, you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that we have the correct acoustical separation. I can tell you that I've done middle school where the principal's office is directly above the music room, and Mark can validate this. So if there was ever a need to make sure that we had the correct ceiling and
Middle
floor.
school, they sound pretty good though.
Yeah, but there's only so many Star Wars theme songs that you can listen to before you drive
Want to
yourself.
listen to the
Eight
band
years
the first
away.
week? Nothing like a violin the first week of lessons.
As long as we take care of it.
It's a good point, Dennis. We need to make sure that we stay on top of that throughout the design. So our media and art areas, so this is where our learning stair goes up to the second floor of the media center. There could be, this is an area where some of the older kids could have some of their age-specific material, as well as some additional instructional space. Banked on the other side of the double height opening at the entry is our second visual arts area and kiln and storage. We'll likely do some massaging of where that kiln room and storage is to add some visual connection into the corridor from the visual arts area.
So would students use that learning stair to go from the base floor, first floor, up to the second floor?
Ideal, you mean the big wide learning stair that's in the
Right.
media center? It's really all part of the media center. I would not anticipate that they would use that as a primary way. However, if they're in the media center and want to get to the second floor, they're going to go up the learning stair.
Yes, and that's kind of my point. If you're in a wheelchair,
You have to go outside the media center to the elevator and up.
yeah, separate but equal is not equal. So it's a nice feature, but you're putting a child that has a disability at a disadvantage.
So we will investigate that. I can tell you that we've done a number of these exact type of learning stairs, and we'll see how we've addressed that issue in other applications.
Yeah, I mean, one way to handle it would be to move the elevator and have a two-door elevator.
Materials and form. Ernest, do I need to wake you up?
All right, I'm gonna go up.
Sure.
That's the sugar fix.
So the many discussions that have been had regarding the farm and the field, you can see we've coalesced some precedent examples. And what you'll see as a consistent theme is that the vernacular is there that really evoke that kind of idea of the agrarian aesthetic.
the clean lines here, this is obviously a 21st century school, so we want it to look, to have a contemporary feel, but still evoke the idea that we've got a vernacular here that the town really likes the farm to feel. You could see in the examples where we've got the gabled roofs, they're very simple, they're very elegant, they're very clean, they're sleek. So that really plays in some of the examples, and some of the materials that we're looking at are the stone, again, rustic stone that really is used in a lot of foundations with old barns. We've been looking at a more whitewashed brick that has the earth tonalities and some gray tonalities, and we could really work a lot of the palette with that. And we're really looking at a very neutral palette, and we find that bringing in color through paint and keeping the general palette of exterior fairly neutral allows us the flexibility to accent with paint once you get into the building. But again, everybody wants a building that is that stands the test of time, and we think that this architecture really does that. It's very simplified. People understand that the gable roofs, it doesn't go too far out of the way of the architecture. There's things that we'd like to explore on the interiors where there's a little bit more of a clean truss system using tie rods, so that we don't have these bulky trusses. And with the gabled roofs, we have the opportunity to explore that. And again, we're going through ST, so we'll go through the machinations of cost estimating and what we could do. But it serves, it allows the clean roof, the ceilings, especially our hierarchical spaces that bookend the width of the building. We've got the library on one side and the cafeteria that really kind of bookend the symmetry of the building. The other thing we're exploring is cement board. Cement board and or metal panels. What we liked here is that there's a nice range within this palette where they've got a nice range of earth tones. There's a nice proportionality to the planking of that. So the rhythm of how they applied it here, it's vertical, but we could do it horizontal. It's just got a nice scale to it when we're thinking elementary school. And in this example, the use of wood and some of the wood screening, some of the, we're not looking at any kind of cedar for the outside, but the idea of natural woods as an accent, and where we could see applying the natural wood to offset some of the neutral tones. So somehow we'd like to bring in the wood in the exterior, limited in the exterior, and then obviously on the inside to maintain some warmth within the space. So with that said, this is our first look at trying to get the aesthetic. Now this shows the alternate scheme with the birth to 3.
So that's the angled one.
That is the angle. What we liked about it was that it started to create a nice kind of interstitial space here that was a little bit more enclosed, especially with the birth to 3. With admin, the music at the corner, the library at one end, that this really created a nice kind of pocket park for the birth to 3. It also, as you approach from both parent loops, that this starts to come out a little bit more, and so that house form really starts to create a nice welcoming entry. And that being a one-off is a one-story building, so the scale for birth to 3 feels really nice proportionally against the backdrop of the double height media center. So that media center has a face out towards Marion Road and also the approach here. So it really creates a nice intimate space there. And with a little bit more plantings and maybe some kind of fencing, it can really create a nice secure spot. So the media center fronting the west side, we've got nice open curtain walls visibility there, so it really creates that hierarchy. The media center and the cafeteria again are bookending with the symmetry of that front Marion facade. The gymnasium at the center, and we'll see other images there. The main entry has a portico there, so it also scales this down to a more pedestrian scale. You've got some covered space here, so for the inclement weather, you've got like nice coverage as you enter the space. From the backside, we've got the kindergarten wing. So these are the two wings, and as you approach that open courtyard, you'll see the open courtyard down below. The bridge connects on the upper level. This is where we might want to explore the idea of maybe it's the cement board run horizontally, and we look at different color. Here we're looking at the idea of the whitewashed brick. It could be the stone. We're also exploring some kind of field stone as well. If we use it sparingly on the front, maybe we could do it sparingly in the back as well as an accent. We're also exploring maybe that brick continues along here. So this is where we've got our first and second grade down low, access to on grade egress as well. So we're also hoping that we could do gabled roofs here. As again in SD, this is the time we start to explore where we stand budget wise, but it would be nice to continue the gable aesthetic on the backside.
If you were gonna do solar panels down the line, where would they be?
South is to the left here, so we try to figure out the array from the south exposure. This is east, so you're getting morning light here.
And the gable would only be the outside rows of the classrooms. So the gable width would kind of sit on just the outside rows, and then the rest would be internal to the courtyard. At least at this point, would be flat.
So it's more like a mansard.
Yeah, it's not a true mansard. It comes back down. We just think if you bring the gable all the way across that 60 feet, it's going to be way too high. But looking at it gives you the feel of a residential kind of lower scale, smaller scale from the outside. So that's so there. I guess the long story short is there's opportunities to put it on flat.
All right, so you do have some flat areas.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think he needs some players too.
And then along the perimeter here would be our rain gardens, our detention with some nice wild grass and wildflower as well. So we've got a perimeter of our playscapes along here. And then this is the central lawn that you see. We really love the idea that the central lawn accented by the axial gym. There could be an event out here. It could be summer events. It could be 6th grade graduation on this lawn. It really sets itself up nicely, and the idea that we'll have, again, some rain gardens along here, some plantings. It can really be a beautiful space. Again, the bookend of the cafeteria and the media center, really evoking the farm to field aesthetic. The use of, so here we're suggesting maybe that's the field stone. This could be along the covered walkway, some fir or some cedar. It's protected, so that graying out, we could protect that even better, that it's covered, and then having some wood underneath the covered porch there would really warm up that entry, as well as the canopy leading into the cafeteria. A couple of things you'll see here. We've got a visual arts classroom up top. There's a window that leads you into the main entry, which would be a double height space. So that parallel with the media center could really feel nice and open as you enter the space. Same with the cafeteria.
Is it obvious where the main entrance is from?
Well, the main entry's got the longer canopy here.
Just as I've been to schools where not certain where to go.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of why
Chuck
we,
and I went to one,
I was with you.
and we got
Something
lost.
inside.
Oh, yeah.
Looked like a big barn, but we had no idea where the exits were.
it's a good point, and we were kind of struggling with this because there was so much symmetry, and we just kind of started playing around with this, elongating this canopy. And then with that, we've got admin, we put the stained wood on this side. So there's a little bit more detail here. There's a field stone wall here, which we could put signage, so we could bank the signage right above there. We're trying to create a little bit of verticality here. It's a little subtle, but that could be a field stone. We'd love to somehow put a fireplace. We know that's probably not PC, but it could be something that creates a little bit more hierarchy with that entry. That within the media center could be something something pretty neat.
Good place to put the TV. The one thing, I mean, it looks very nice, but if I'm standing where I'm standing and I'm looking for the front door, I'm walking to the gym.
Well, we've got our walkways along here. You know,
And your
But the
parking
it'll be
over here.
intuitive at some point. You know, it's not going to be.
I think as you
There
work
won't be
on
a
that
guessing
design,
game
yeah, you
where
wanna
the
make
entry
that
doors.
front entrance
A little bit more
a little
prominent.
more obvious,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's-
just slow somewhere, put it towards the front door.
Yeah, I mean, especially it could happen right above the canopy here.
That'd be really nice.
And I think the subtleties with like with the stained wood here, the field stone being here. So we don't have the same field stone here. You know, we don't want to diminish this as an entry for like the bus drop off as well, but we feel like you know that this makes sense with the longer
And event entry,
porch.
you know.
Right.
This is event entry point too.
Sure.
So you want it to be inviting, but declarative that this is, you know, the main school entrance.
So it is something that we've been going back and forth on in the office, right? I mean, intuitively, you want to signify entry in a hierarchical way. And typically that means an vertical expression. However, there's something that's really nice and understated about the volumes in some of our larger spaces that kind of create this pattern. And I think we're gonna be revisiting that, or not revisiting this, but continue to make sure that we can make wayfinding a priority for the main entrance without detracting from this kind of nice rhythm that has been set up here.
Her votes for silos.
That's right. That's, okay, now
Those silos,
we
no,
had
those-
a silo
We
nomination
were in
earlier.
silos already.
Okay. Okay, so we're about halfway through our presentation. That was the last slide. I guess we can leave
Nicely
this
done.
on.
You guys have done it. No, not ready yet. So at this point, do you need anything from us? You want any initial, I think people were saying things as they went along. I don't know if people had any initial reaction.
Looks nice.
Yeah, just gotta reiterate, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I like all the angles
Sounds
of the
like-
hallways and everything else you guys put in there.
Sounds like you've got some nice positive comments.
Where are we on square footage?
Lots of extra square footage.
No, well, it was a little bit, we were measuring it versus OSC GNR, to try to get you back to the allowable area. I don't know if I want to answer that. We were over that by like 6,000 or 7,000, but we're within the ballpark. We're within the ballpark of your gross square footage that was shown. So it's not dramatically over. It's within swinging distance if it's over.
Yeah, and I think one of the conversations we want to have is if we go over a little bit, what impact is that going to have financially?
Sure.
You know,
Yep.
it may be that it's worth it
Yep.
for us to run something a little bit larger if it gets us some spaces that we want and we're still within our budget.
Yeah, a couple of the spaces went in, and I know it's late, so like the teacher planning that we put in the corners, those were never really programmed in the ed spec, but that was mentioned early. So there's a few little spaces, but we'll get you a concrete answer. on
Yeah,
this.
I hate to go through and cut, and then,
Yep.
have a building that really is lacking. Don't pick up and go yet, just a couple of things. The last thing I had under architects was scheduling neighborhood community presentations. I know I've had, just a couple of people who have contacted me, wondering when we were going out to the North End and Norton communities and saying, here's what we've got. I know initially there was some discussion of doing those over the summer. Having seen what's here, I think it makes a whole lot of impression to get out to a point where things are cleaned up and you can go to the community and say, here's what the school will look like. But I'm looking at something in like mid-September or something.
Yeah, Jeff, Justin, Vin, myself, we talked about trying to nail something down in mid-September to a place where people are back from vacation and everything like that, and able to engage in that. We just need to connect with Rich to help orchestrate that.
And they would be two separate meetings.
Yeah,
One for the North End, one for the Norton.
Right.
Would we send letters out to everyone in the
Yeah,
community? Or?
Arcadis has a process for engaging the community, and we wouldn't, work through that process. Certainly, it's not enough to just email our parents.
Right.
It's a community presentation, so.
Yeah, and particularly, the neighbors.
Right.
But I think I've had people from all over the community who have said, I want to see what's going on.
Yeah.
They're paying the bill. They're curious, I think in a really positive way, to see what we're going to have. So I'm going to put that on the upcoming agendas so that we make sure we nail that down.
Any thoughts on doing something at the fair?
Yeah, we already have booked not just our typical booth, you talking about the fall festival, but an additional booth as well.
Oh, great.
Cool.
You take things like this and put them up
Right, yeah.
and running slideshow.
Pigs aren't allowed.
It's too big.
The pigs too big now?
Way too big.
Antonia's
Yeah,
brought her pet, or her pigs.
You have a pet pig?
They have 4 pet pigs.
Oh, there you
my
go.
gosh.
It
Yeah.
would be perfect. This is the mark. It's, it's gonna be,
Right.
it'll
Well,
draw,
we'll take the friendly
it'll
as
draw
well.
everybody in to see the little pet
Ham it up.
piggies.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, school.
Yeah, they're less little now than they were.
Just
Yeah,
make sure
they
it's
get
not
like-
near the barbecue.
The last thing I had on here, which I'm going to put off, is project labor agreements. As you will recall, Jeff had brought up the concept of project labor agreements very early. We then asked him to come back and do a presentation to us on the pros and cons of what it means and that sort of thing. At that time, as a committee, we said, well, let's wait until we've got all of our people on board, where we can really get some feedback and some opinions. I don't think that anyone around the table expressed a strong opinion one way or the other at this point, so we're not pushing anything. But what we're looking to do is just get some feedback and one way or the other, make a decision on this. But I'm just gonna push it off. It's, 10:15. I don't think that anyone wants a real conversation on that right now. And I don't believe that it's something that we're pressed for time on. So that's something we can be looking at further. Anything else for our future agendas? This was too short an agenda. Do you want to add something? The next meeting is going to focus on Norton.
We're going to go through the same type of presentation for Norton. It will likely be, we won't necessarily go over the mechanical system, because I think we got some genuine feedback and
Yeah.
we have a pretty good idea of where we're going there.
And I
But
would
it'll be
assume
kind of a
many
similar
of the
look.
same things are going to be
Yes.
For Norton, and obviously the site plan is gonna be very different, but a lot of the
A
classroom
lot of the
layouts, things like
principles, a
that.
lot of the, we're building from the same foundation of
Right.
information.
So that should be a much shorter presentation.
I get your hint.
Subtle.
This was well worth the time. It was well-
Yeah.
Could you send me a copy of the presentation?
We have it on thumb drive.
Oh, is it?
Give to
Okay,
you. Yep.
perfect. Anything else for the good of you? All right, in that case, I will take a motion.
So moved.
So moved. I didn't finish the sentence yet. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
You'll second? All those in favor? All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.